What is real? Real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Open your mind.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh. Welcome to Red Pill Project's Conversations on the Fringe. Here tonight with the one, the only, the legend, and himself, David Whitehead, DW Truth Warrior. I hope everybody is doing well out there. We got a great show for you here tonight. I know everybody's waiting for the Joe Rogan, Donald Trump interview to drop. Please don't leave us. Hang out with us for a little while. Also, we got the Iran-Israel conflict expanding right now, and potentially Iran is about to strike back. Their airspace is closed, so we'll keep you updated on that if we do find out information. But tonight, we're going to be talking about cult of power and death. And, well, that's kind of what we just talked about, Israel and Iran. Well, Israel. David, so this is your new point of research that you've been doing, cult of death and power. I'm interested to hear more. Tell me.
Well, first of all, Josh, good to see you as always. Been a while, a little bit less these days. I've been on the air, but got a lot going on, but I'm so glad to be back and good to see everybody in the chat. Hello, hello. Yeah, Cults of Death and Power. This is actually a reprise of a series. So I've been working on this new project, and it's been a reprise of a series I did back in, I think it was 2017. I did this, and they were just originally long form mishmashes of research I was doing at the time. It's sort of the bedrock that got me into my Cult of the Medics thesis for my docuseries. And so instead of just re-uploading the old series I had already done, I wanted to redo it, do it right, add some new stuff. So this is the new current updated version of that series. It's a 4-part series. I'm over on Substack now. That's my main publishing zone. I got tons of free content up there. I also have my premium content up there. It's all in one place. I kind of like it because it sends everything out to all my like Spotify and everywhere. So anybody gets lost as to where to find my latest home for where I'm doing my work, you can always get me at dwtruthwarrior.com. And so this research is a comparative analysis of both ancient and modern cults with the goal of trying to understand human psychology, power dynamics, what attracts people to cults, and what is that whole dynamic going on in both the cult leader and the cult followers. And of course, my curiosity with this subject has been trying to learn about human behavior and about power dynamics, all the things that I'm sure you talk about as well. We've spoken about this many times before, and why I keep sort of beating this drum is because I feel like as long as I've been doing research on cults and talking it on all these shows and doing all this stuff, it's never been more relevant than now. It's the most relevant time to have this conversation, which is why I'm still trying to keep it alive and keep people thinking in that regard. Because if we can understand the dynamics of how human behavior works, psychology, group mentality, collectivism, we can understand what's going on in politics, what's going on in the world, what's going on with the tyranny that we see rising across the West right now, and the battle that's going on. We'll have a better insight to understand all these dynamics. So that's my goal. It's not all dark and scary. It's a mixed bag. I try to bring in like the antidote and the immunity for your psyche side of things as well, to show maybe the difference between cult leaders, cult dynamics, psychological warfare, all these things. And what's the difference between that and like true, authentic thinkers and teachers and guides and people that you can actually learn from and be inspired by. What's the difference, right? It also entails a deep study into the history of religion. And I've been doing comparative religion and mythology my whole life. Huge subject. I know you're into that as well. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And it's been an eternally fascinating roller coaster ride of research.
Well, and I think that's one of the questions that kind of came up in my mind. And I think I know what you're going to say, but I would love to hear your perspective on it. Is what is the difference between a formalized religion, a social ideology, or a cult?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of differences, but there's also a lot of bridges, right? This is the
Right.
interesting thing. You got to get nuanced on this stuff. And the way I see it is freedom is the difference, right? So this means, just in a basic sense, if I join a religion, say I go, okay, I'm going to take that Jehovah's Witness up that came to my house and go down to the whatever they have and start hearing their gospel. If I don't like what I'm hearing, I can just leave and I can go find another one. And, it's up to me, right? But when you're in the dynamics of a cult, you're dealing with, you're probably dealing with a very charismatic, narcissistic leader or group of leaders that are utilizing essentially the playbook of psychological warfare to try to get you into behavioral patterns that operate against your best interests, but only serve the best interests of the cult. And you're not as free to come and go as you please. Let me just put it like that. It's kind of like joining a gang. You try to get out of it and it's not so easy to get out. And so I do a lot of coverage in my series about people who've survived cults and, sort of that process of coming out of it. And while I believe that personal agency always exists, no matter what you're getting involved with, you always have that personal choice to say, hey, this isn't feeling right. This isn't smelling right. I got to get the hell out of here. I feel like the emphasis in the rhetoric and in the body of it is in a religion, it should be. I'm not saying it's always like this because we see these things in religion as well. But in a more sane religion that's there for building community, cultural identity, giving people a basic framework to try to access the questions about spirituality, the nature of consciousness, what is God, what is life? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's many ways to approach it, right?
Mhm.
And I believe all the religions that we've come up with in human society, they all have pros and cons to them, right? But the pro for, say, a religious structure should be that it isn't dogmatic and it's there to inspire a community oriented approach that also allows for freedom of thought, freedom of outside ideas, freedom to sort of shop around and compare notes in a more scientific bend. Whereas in a cult, that's a closed circuit and you follow the edicts. Oftentimes these cults get really crazy with all kinds of blood oaths and tattooing and just on and on we go. And then the ones that I've covered, which are sort of the extreme end of that spectrum, get into ritualistic suicide, mass murder. And then when you get into the political cults, we're talking about genocide, tyranny, and all these types of things. So my focus is on what is the nature of freedom? How do we preserve it? What systems of thought are there to truly promote that, as well as the advancement of human psychology, spirituality, and development, optimization, if you will, and which ones are there to become a mechanism of control, to control the minds of their adherents and to not allow that open-minded, natural human capacity to seek the truth, even if you might not see it when you're first presented with information. You have to have the ability to question what you're told. And so when I see that you get into these different, and we see this on the internet, we see this in many versions of cults. We see that popping up all over the place right now in various guises. I took the same blueprint and applied it to what we went down during the pandemic. And that's what sort of produced Cult of the Medics. Hey, they actually went to the source material of cults and just repackaged it so that they could sell the world on this one particular way of the science and all that. And so I just started to notice patterns, and I'm seeing these patterns more and more. And I think in the end, this is a lesson for all of us on how to save our minds from being controlled by someone else that may or may not have our best at heart. I believe that if you're truly on the path of truth, freedom, and justice, if you're truly on the path of aligning yourself with the Great Spirit, with God, with whatever name and label you want to give that force or that presence that I believe is there to some degree, the more you should be able to actually apply your reason and your mind to the task, and not sit there and listen to some guy preaching at you from some pulpit, or some Jim Jones character that's going to talk a good game until he wants you to drink the cyanide and the Kool-Aid, right? And of course, it's the same lesson that we need to learn when we look at what's going on with our politicians and with the people who are in positions of power, authority, and trust in our lives. And we have to ask the question, is that freedom dynamic there? Is that genuine desire to promote knowledge, truth, understanding, etc., and bring out your best potential? Is that the motivation behind what we're involved in here? Or are we getting stuck in limited belief systems and limited thinking and dogmatic thinking that's actually more for going to serve those who seek control and domination over your mind? And I'll just wrap this up with that old statement. I'm trying to remember who said it, but it's kind of the old thing that if you are not in charge of your mind, if you don't have dominion over your mind and your thinking, someone else will. Yep. And if you just sit there and go, if you're on the other side and go, well, I'm not going to be a part of anything, I'm not going to think at all, I'm just going to kind of sit in the middle all the time, well, then in that sense, you're also vulnerable to being sort of programmed externally. And I'm advocating for a much more internal, sovereign approach when it comes to the question of spirituality.
I go sometimes I go with the older interpretation of what's the difference between a religion and a cult, and that's a couple million people. But
yeah, there you go.
But in the aspect of freedom, it's interesting that you see it in the aspects of freedom, because I agree 100%. Although when I look at that aspect of freedom, it comes about because in religions, there is a level of interpretation that brings about from the parishioner, right? From the person who is integrated into the religion, there is this freedom of interpretation. There's this freedom of understanding. It wasn't always like that with the most predominant religions. And today, in Islam, it definitely is not like that. And Judaism, it's not like that. There's various different sects, but in Christianity, it absolutely is like that. But then in cults, there's also this hidden facet. The reason for the psychological warfare and the emotional warfare that is played on the people is because there is typically something going on within those cults that's deeper, that's darker, that someone wants to keep secret, or it's an agenda of which that cult is working towards. Or at least that's what I've noticed. I mean, we go to the, David Koresh, Jim Jones, all these, there is that aspect of the sexual abuse and the orgies and everything like that, where if that information got out, all of a sudden that whole infrastructure of that cult becomes ruined socially, in the social perspective. And so to keep those people in line, you have to create this edict that they have to conform to, and you have to emotionally beat it back into them so that they do not waver from that line of deception.
Yeah, I like that too. And I got to say, like, when we talk about the current state of affairs in the traditional religious systems that we see, I see a lot of these sort of cult-like dynamics taking place. And of course, you can tell right away, like, so just so people know where I'm coming from with this, is I'm very much more of a personalist when it comes to having a sort of relationship with the divine. Okay, let's just keep it light. All right, I definitely think you can be a part of groups and dynamics and communities and all that when you want to go with those things. But I think that the evidence of how I think true spirituality should be thought of is in the fact that every religion you can name, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, any of them, they all have multiple layers of competing sects and factions that are all divided amongst themselves and all disagree within their own houses. Let alone the fact that they all war against each other. And then just keep going, and people make up new stuff all the time. I mean, look at this new wokeism. What is that but something that was sort of created in the vacuum that was left by the corruption of the institutions of these religious systems that are.
Well, it's a cult. It's a cult. And maybe that's a good place to start, is wokeism, right? Because we've actually covered this on Badlands on our Earth Chronicles with G. Edward Griffin, and talking about collectivism, talking about altruism, and that what is derived from the old ideas of Marxism is this new this neo-Marxism that is prevalent in today's world, and we call that wokeism. I mean, this is nothing more than Marxist ideologies being redressed and put out there to the people, to a level of conformity, and the people are being highly deceived, but they fall right in line. And I think that comes about through various points of social engineering, social conditioning, education, infiltration within the governmental systems, and the destruction of the nuclear family. But either way, it's exactly what's happening right now. So what are your thoughts on modern day wokeism being this neo-Marxism?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's just a rebranded, repackaged version of these Marxist tenets, which itself, if you just keep going, okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. Where did Marxism come from? Was it invented by some guy named Karl Marx? Does anybody actually still believe this? If so, you need to tune into this series. The thing is that these ideas that are sort of reprised every couple decades, okay,
Yeah.
they don't just start in the 20th century, okay? Fascism, Nazism, all the isms, you woke is all this stuff. Everybody's like, oh, this just popped up yesterday. Oh, Karl Marx wrote a book, and then it started this whole thing, and then we had Mao Zedong and Stalin, and it's like, no. That's just it's like starting the movie 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah.
My question was, where have I seen this before? And what I like to do is go into the manifestos and go into the statements made by the biggest advocates of these ideas, and start to look at the way they talk. I'm trying to get to, what's your premise, right?
Right.
That's the old thing. If you don't know the truth, check your premise. If you feel you're confused and you're on the fence and you're in the gray zone and you're just trying to be neutral, check your premise. The truth is not neutral. It just is, or it is not. So if we're going to find out if we look under the hood of Marxism, okay, and you really dive deep, you'll start to see that, well, interesting. So we've got this guy, Karl Marx, who writes this book, The Communist Manifesto, allegedly. But people forget that he was a member of like 2 different Masonic lodges.
Yeah, he was.
Right. And then they forget that, okay, when did the French Revolution take place? That took place a little bit before Marx's time. And what was the ideas that spawned the French Revolution? Well, just go read the treaties, go read the tracts that you can still find at museums, online, go look at the rhetoric that was put out, go find out who financed it, go find out that it wasn't just these poor people fighting these elites that were trying to suppress them. The movement was sponsored and financed by these very elites themselves. And guess what? This wasn't done on the public square level. This was done behind the lodge doors of secret societies. And people on your show know what I'm talking about, but the normies out there that still think CNN is God's word are going to go, what do you mean secret societies? That's like conspiracy theory stuff, isn't it? And it's like, no, just, human behavior historically is largely conspiratorial. Let's be honest. And we need to understand why these dynamics keep showing up. So the reason I'm going to the French Revolution is I did a series. We've probably talked about it before, but it kind of relates to this new series I'm doing a little bit. It's called The Occult Conspiracy. And it was based on a book by an author named Michael Howard. And then, of course, I brought in a lot of other thinkers as well. This is what I try to do, is go, okay, this guy has a really good idea. Let's try to find some corroboration or people that have differences of opinion. And lo and behold, when you find some of the best researchers on these subjects and you start to look at the actual literature and the history of these things, you'll see that a lot of this stuff that we now call today, we're fighting over what's the origin of communism, fascism, socialism, and all these different cults and whatnot, wokeism now, which is just the latest thing. Where did it originate? Well, you find out the whole thing was essentially built, the idea of this, let's call it collectivism, because you brought up G. Edward Griffin. That's what he would call it. He's like, it's just all the same. It's different brands of Gatorade. It's the same Gatorade, right? So that collectivist doctrine didn't originate with Marx, didn't originate with the Nazis or the people that wrote those teleprompter speeches or whatever. It didn't originate with the guys that fomented the French Revolution. This goes back to ancient cults. Ancient, I'm talking Egypt level ancient, okay? The same rhetoric, the same the same effects produced in reality when these types of ideas are applied en masse. Okay. That's what you got to study. Forget about what all these PhDs or whatever are talking about on the internet. What is the effect of certain ideas on human society? That's all I care about. What's the facts of the matter? You know what I mean?
So it's interesting to point out too, that if you go to the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, if you go to the history of the Roman Empire, at the end towards the collapse of these societies, what do they say about the people? They were engaged in gay orgies, and their society had completely destabilized and disintegrated to a smaller degree, right? And there's these similarities to where we're seeing right now, and we can throw that into the midst of cycle, but it's not. It's being perpetuated. It's being perpetuated by some type of controlling factions that seek to destabilize a civilization when it suits them the best, so that they can reorganize it into something more, I guess, optimized in a perspective.
Yes, yes. And Josh, this is the big penny to drop here for me. Okay. And you tell me, I want to know what you think. And in the chat, let me know what you think. We talk a lot about, especially when we're in the conspiracy world view, right? We go, oh, look at them. Look at those greedy corporations and bankers and governments and tyrants, and look at the history of all these totalitarians and blah, blah, blah. Great. We need to analyze that. But let's just look at this from the cult perspective for 2 seconds. Remember John of God?
Mm-hmm.
Promoted by Oprah Winfrey and gang. Oh, yeah. Okay. He was a healer, right? Apparently. But
and
also
by the way, he did have healing powers.
He had something.
He healed Bill Clinton of cancer.
Well, that's what we're told, right?
Well,
I mean,
right.
Either way.
Right.
Either way, even if they do have what they're saying, what you also find out he's involved in human trafficking and organ harvesting. Okay. So like
farms.
Right. So there's some interesting shit with that. So, and then, let's go. Robert de Grimston, Process Church of the Final Judgment. We could end it there. We can go to Jim Jones. We can look at all these cases, right? I did one on Heaven's Gate in one of the chapters, and did a whole video on Heaven's Gate with Marshall Applewhite. And we had to watch this creepy 10-minute video of this very creepy old man talking to his adherents, who are all wearing black robes with triangle logos that say away team. And they've got Hale Bopp's comets. You got the comet symbolism right there. And he's basically inducting them into the cult. And they're all celebrating the fact that in a week from the video that I showed everybody in this section, they're all about to drink poison and kill themselves knowingly and willingly. And it was like a celebration of them believing that they were going to evolve to the next dimension that existed above the human level. And that in order to do it, they had to time their self-termination with the passing of Hale Bopp's comet. Now, that's a good one to go with. So here we go. You've got astronomy and astrology, okay, mixed in is a big giveaway. Not to say that that's all evil. It's just used, right, as an attractant. Tool. You've got the symbolism. You've got the typical father figure, mother figure. Don't forget, it was Marshall Applewhite and his wife as well that were involved in it. And then you've got these cult adherents, right? Who, if you look at the video of these people, these poor people, they are clearly the sort of solo types, the more rejects from society types, right? They're very much themselves. And these are the people that you can just see it on their faces, just as you see it in these woke kids in university who are looking for attention and validation, who are looking for meaning in life, who are looking for someone to validate them and a purpose for living. And when you have a very charismatic cult leader, or you have a multi-million-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar media enterprise that's there to say, yeah, come join the cult. We'll validate you. We'll give you a path for meaning, right? Sign here for a lifetime of drugs and surgery. Or in case of Heaven's Gate, sign here for the ride on Hale Bopp's comet to get to the next dimension. They went to the next dimension, all right. But I don't think it was what they were sold. So my question, this is where I want to leave it. Are we supposed to only study this subject of whether we're talking cults or whether we're talking political espionage, tyranny, and conspiracy, are we only supposed to be looking at this from an us versus them perspective? Because who invented that entire dynamic in terms of rhetoric? That comes out of that Communist Manifesto. That's very much the victim, oppressor versus oppressed class or structure, whatever. That's totally Marxism right there. And the fascists used it too. They're just a different brand of the same poison. And so I look at it all together and I go, we're looking at the wrong thing. Obviously, there's psychopaths and narcissists out there that would love for you to worship them and follow everything they say and be a part of their cult. I mean, being a cult leader is pretty attractive. You make a lot of money, you get all the chicks or the guy, whatever you want, you get all the glory and the praise. You don't have to do much. You just got to sell people a nice little story. But why does it keep working? This is my quest. Why are there so many raving fans? Why do Che Guevara and all these communist totalitarians, as well as the fascists, as well as all the other ists, okay? Why do they have so many people clapping for them and cheering for them? Why does Mao Zedong have videos, video after video of all these young people, old people waving his red book, crying, just streaming down their face as he is about to literally kill everybody over a period of time and become like the heavyweight champion of democide? So my question in this series, and it was the same question I asked in the Cult of the Medics, was, we should look at the tyrants and the cult leaders for sure, but we can't stop the investigation there. What is it in us, Josh, that makes us want to be a part of something like that and just have no detective sensors active, no alarm bells are ringing? You know, they're ready to go right up to the point of either killing other people in the name of the cult or killing themselves. That's where I wanted to focus it, because I feel like that's the solution. No cult, no political tyrant would be in business. No Illuminati, none of these people would be in business if they didn't have a vast majority of the human population that was not only just going along with it, but literally clapping for these evil ones.
I got three things that I would say to that answer. Number one is the human condition, suffering, right? We all see suffering in the world. Right. We all understand suffering. And that is one of the most prolific tools utilized by these cults to target people specifically. So number one is that. Number two is a lack of self-knowledge, a lack of the esoteric, the lack of the inner understanding of the self. We go about in this illusionary world believing that everything external to us is real, is that this is reality outside of us. And so it concretes that suffering as something that is a part of me and an extension of me. And so it reaffirms it. And then the other part is something you already said, social acceptance. Many of these people, when you have high levels of suffering or trauma or abuse in your lives, whether it was generated from family or religion or where you grew up, and then you bring about the aspect of a lack of self-knowledge, these people just want to be accepted. This is why you have this trans community right now in the world. They just want to be accepted. So when you have a movement that derives and it's hitting all the key points of the aspects of suffering that they're seeing, now they have their savior that is externalized, that is going to bring about the justice. And so, yes, they rally behind it because now that whole crowd is one of them, is someone else that they can relate to that brings about that aspect of social acceptance. And so they will die for that movement because it is truly the one thing that is motivating them to live.
Very well said. No, exactly. And so it was three things. You said it was the suffering, the awareness of suffering, right? Which sort of gives you, okay, I need to find some meaning here. I need to find some reason for all this crazy suffering in the world, or maybe even explain my own internal psychological suffering, right? And then the second is social acceptance, right?
Well, self-knowledge,
right? And then the drive for social acceptance, right? That's that's one of the more obvious ones, I think, too. And that's a good one to think on for a second, because when you see that, okay, when we understand human psychology, that we are social creatures, but we do also possess this private space in our minds internally, right? So we have these components of consciousness. We have these elements. You have the in the German philosophy, they'd have like the Midwelt, the Eigenwelt, and the Umwelt, which are like the three spheres of influence in your life. You have your inner world, the external world, and the world of other consciousnesses, of other people. Or no, maybe one of the levels would be like the transcendental, like that'd be like God and you know, whatever you think it is that motivates life and consciousness to begin with. So if you don't get taught at a young age some kind of at least loose blueprint on how to answer those questions and answer that, what you started with, which was like, if my children ask me, why is there so much war in the world? Why is there still wars going on? Why is there still all these problems? And they start hearing about it. And then they start, man, there's a lot of problems. It's not just a few, there's a lot of problems. And they see the stark reality of the human condition. That can be traumatic of itself, to just go, holy shit. Like it must mean there's no meaning. Right. And I think that's where a lot of these young kids in universities today who are being brainwashed by targeted propaganda to induce this as well. Right. They're feeling that. And you hear it in them. That's why they're so angry and they're so confrontational. They're also in hormonal development stages and psychological development stages. So they're very confused in many regards. I remember being there. Right. Sometimes I still go there. We all do. But you need something to anchor to. Okay. So we realize there's an ingredient to human consciousness that is needed, right? We don't, it's like, it doesn't just come, the potential for it comes with the package. But if we just look at a human with like basic settings, okay? Because I believe, think about it. We're born into this world. And if I was born in, I don't know, a Muslim country, I would probably be raised with a totally different framework of consciousness than if I was raised in a Buddhist country or a Christian country or an atheist or a secular society or whatever. So your environment that you're born in has a huge impact. We know this from psychology. That's just culturally. What about down to the family unit? Now you got to, okay, do I got that drunk father who's always coming home beating the wife and the kids? Or do I have the dragon mother or whatever that's in there just constantly like, you know, projecting her dark shadow onto the children and causing those problems? Was I born into this perfect family and maybe it was so perfect that that alone drove me mad and I didn't quite get why my family was perfect, but the rest of the world is messed up. And then I felt this existential guilt. There's so many conditions that you can be born in, okay, that can alter the settings over time. And then you get hit with a few traumatic events, or, you know, when you're young, some people start calling you names or you're not cool, you don't fit in. This starts to create a pathway in your mind and in your life that should you not expose yourself to some deeper thinking and some good philosophy and some good reasoning, you will be caught in some kind of a net that's been created for you and will take you out of your natural state. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's a big part of it.
It's divergent tendencies. And
right.
If you don't have the proper social cultural structure in your life, if you don't have the right people to guide you in life, it's very difficult to find that pathway. And you do have this divergent effect that takes over that kind of almost beelines towards collectivism, because why not? Right? You know, there's a kid who looks like me. He doesn't smile. He doesn't do, you know, he's the quiet kid and he's going to that group after school every day. Well, I'm going to go there and I'm going to bite the bullet, my heart racing, and I'm going to walk in the room. They're all going to clap and congratulate me for coming in. Oh my God, I'm finally accepted for once in my life. I mean, this is what really drives it. And here's the thing is that's why I said this suffering, right? We all recognize it, but it is the primary tool that is utilized to hinge upon that broken emotional state. Because another thing that happens to humanity is, number one, is we are never taught in any form of education, and not even in a state of family conditioning, how to deal with emotion. We have no level of emotional intelligence. We're like thrown into this world with no guidebook. We got to figure it out on our own. We have to move through our own points of suffering, and we have to rationalize that and try to come to some point of internal realization of what these emotions are and what they mean and what is truly buried deep inside and deriving from them. But at the end of the day, you know, if you have a good teacher, if you're someone who's in a Shaolin temple, or someone who's in, you know, the Hermetic societies or anything like this, well, guess what? You have a thorough understanding of what that is. You understand why it's moving within you and how it moves within you, right? And so that becomes a cultural divergent aspect that we look at, because in Western society, that is completely eliminated. And I think that that was done on purpose for exactly what we're talking about right now. And so when we look at that, all of this, and that's why I said self-knowledge, all of this comes about because of the lack of self-knowledge. And what I mean by self-knowledge is not that I'm conscious and I'm aware, but that internal state that I know myself to a certain degree, and that degree to which I know myself, I can now have a relationship with what I consider to be the divine spirit, God, whatever you want to call it. Because if you do not know yourself, if you do not understand yourself on an emotional, on a physical, on a spiritual, on a mental basis, if you don't know how smart you are, if you don't understand what you know, right? You don't know shit. And if you don't know shit about yourself, you can't know anything about the world around you or anybody around you, and you're going to be easily manipulated. And I think that this is one of the greatest problems that I'm finding right now, especially in these newer generations that are coming up. And this is why they diverge into these, what we would call cults, or this Marxist culture, this neo-Marxist culture.
Yeah, no, so many good points. And this is where I've been really trying to think deeply on this and think about myself as well. Like growing up, the challenges I faced psychologically when I was younger, going through anxiety, depression, had some suicidal ideation at certain points in my life earlier on. And I feel like it was people that came into my life that gave me this philosophy, and I'm going to give it to you very straight. It's the idea of living life and embracing life in spite of everything. And there's actually a book that I did a recent episode on, just a short little video where I was talking about this book. It's by Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book, another great book everybody needs to check out, where he was talking about man's search for meaning. Yep. And it's a brilliant book. And you got to know who Viktor Frankl was, being someone that survived totalitarian regime, lived in concentration camps, came back, and for some reason was able to go through, I'm sure, seeing the most inhuman, the most evil, just the basically seeing up front, close and personal, the dark side of humanity that's just so cold and callous, that's able to disregard life. Okay. So you're surrounded by that. You're watching people just get killed like dogs. You're watching people starve to death next to you. You're waking up next to somebody in your little, whatever you're in the concentration camp, who just dies, and you just have to like keep going, right? Like you're just surrounded by death and hopelessness, right? It'd be similar to like an Alexander Solzhenitsyn writing about his experience in the gulags in Russia, or a 100 other names from history well before, right up to now, that we could name, of people who oddly enough didn't succumb to despair, hopelessness, black-pilled mentality, or giving up on life. It's weird how the greatest traumas somehow triggered in these people a level of genius and a level of it activated the light in them, being confronted directly by the darkness. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this as a possibility. This is what brought me out of it. This is what brought me out of the view of life as being pointless, futile, and whatever, was just realizing, wait, but that doesn't explain the other side of the force, right? It's not the only thing that exists. And then I started to realize, as when I had this eureka moment in my life, and my life completely changed. That was another thing. When I was applying the old, everything's hopeless, futile, nihilistic, whatever, when I was applying that mentality to my life was shit. Wasn't getting the good jobs, wasn't getting the girlfriends, wasn't getting just horrible. Okay. And not productive. And then when my mindset shifted to going, well, okay, there's a lot of dark shit going on in the world. There's a lot of evil people, a lot of jaded people, a lot of bad things going on. Well, in spite of that, I'm not going to be those people. I'm going to be like, and then I had a bunch of examples, like a Bruce Lee, like these people who have this positive, successful mindset about going after it no matter what. And by the way, these are the people that built civilization. So thank you to the people that were able to hold off the darkness long enough to kindle that little light and then create the best things we take for granted today. And it was only those kinds of people. The people that didn't do that are the ones that are the victim Olympics people. We've always had them. It's the vast majority of people out there, sadly. So if you're in this mindset of just very simply having the ability to live life to its fullest, in spite of everything, in spite of the fact that we're on the doorstep of World War III, in spite of the fact that we've got absolutely Richter scale levels of insanity going on in our society that make it seem like, oh my God, we're totally going over the edge. It's over. We're just done. Right. And now everybody's, running for the hills. In spite of that, and there's been greater challenges in history that we can think of as well that people have faced. There's people that still rise above all that and create solutions and create great thinking and great art and great music and great literature and think brilliant thoughts and then actually make change in the physical world. They don't just sit there writing everything on a goddamn whiteboard. They actually get hands on things and make change. The proud, the brave. That's who has brought us to this point. That's why human civilization is not completely over yet. It should have been finished numerous times. And then I can only say that if you wanted proof of a sort of divine, if you want to use that language, like a divine or a consciousness or proof of the light, just keep it simple. To me, that's it, is that it's so powerful that it can penetrate the most dark evil possible and turn out human beings that are able to look at the abyss and smile back at it and go, yeah, I've won against you, and I'm now going to go and create freedom in my life. That the freedom I don't see in the world, I'm going to create within myself. The sanity and reason I don't see in the world, I'm going to create within myself. The solutions that I'm not seeing coming from my dingbat politicians that I shouldn't have elected, I'm going to create in my own personal life, whatever it is. I'm not going to be a victim to say, oh, it was Justin Trudeau that made my life miserable. Yeah, the guy is a pain in the frickin' arse, and I can't wait to see him hauled in front of a tribunal. But am I going to let this situation ruin my entire life and my zest for life? Hell no. So this mentality for me is what is the antidote, or at least the starting place of the antidote, to being brought into and being vulnerable to a slick snake oil salesman, cult leader, or tyrant, or even a personal friend or family member that will act like those little mini tyrants in your life that'll try to manipulate you and bring you back into their abyss, right? The crabs in the bucket around you. They're trying, when you try to rise up and go, I don't want that negativity in my life. I want to make something of myself. I'm going to go pursue truth, freedom in my life. And they're all like, who the hell do you think you are? And they try to drag you back down. The people that are able to say, yeah, forget it, I'm going to keep going forward. These are the ones that change the world. It's never the masses of people. This is why Marxism will never work. It's never the group. It's never the crowd. There is no such thing as a group. There's just a bunch of individuals that wear costumes and all sing the same songs together. But in the end, they have their own private dreams. They were born as individuals and they will die as individuals. And they will have affiliation changes many times throughout their lives. They'll go from one team to the other. One time they're going to vote for Trump. One time they're going to vote for Kamala, just to give an example. They're going to switch teams constantly. And then they're going to still believe that they were part of a group. They were part of a team. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a part of a group or a team. There's different context for that. We can explain that. But in the context I'm talking about, which is a very negative context, that leads people towards these dark cults and also is leading Western civilization over the cliff, which used to be the pillar of light and freedom and individual thinking until it got overtaken by these types. The reason for it is because there's not enough people within this dynamic that are realizing a lot of what we're seeing with these group dynamics and victim Olympics, it's all an illusion, man. Mm-hmm. So as all the great sages said, know thyself and you will know the universe and the gods. The kingdom of heaven is neither here nor there. It is within you, etc., etc. These are the ideas that for me will release the shackles in your mind, bring vital energy to you, and will inspire you to live life to its fullest and pursue truth and freedom and knowledge and understanding in spite of the darkness and will have you with that psychological and spiritual immunity that you need to get through this dark time that we are in, which actually isn't a dark time. It is the most illuminating time to be alive as a human being, and
Now,
everybody should enjoy the freaking ride. That's what I said.
Isn't that interesting, though? That the darkest times in history become the most illuminating. They're always followed by an age of enlightenment,
Right?
a
Yeah.
golden age. Now, why is that? What if, think about a natural process, right? You have this void or hole of negativity, right? This darkness in the world, this void and hole of negativity. We'll just give it a negative charge. What's it attracting? Positive, right? And we have to understand that maybe it's just a process of the universe or the collective consciousness that in these times of the absence of light, that it sparks the light within those that are in the state of non-acceptance of the darkness. And it sparks it brighter than ever before so that light can shine and be seen by many others to still give them the hope. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You knew who Len Horowitz is, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done this. Yep.
I made this video of Len Horowitz, one of his speeches that he gave. This is to the Magic Sword for everybody. I did this many years ago, but I want to play this real quick for everybody because what Len Horowitz says here is phenomenal, and I think it really kind of helps extrapolate what David and I are saying.
This is the difference between the power of our Creator and anything else, particularly evil. That you can go into a pitch black room full of evil, full of darkness, and light a little candle, and instantly that darkness flees. But you can't do the opposite. You can't go into a well-lit room full of truth and wisdom and righteousness and joy and health and harmony with the universal power. And you can't take any amount of darkness and go into that well-lit room and have any effect whatsoever. That is the metaphor which I frequently think of when I think that I'm not empowered. It is the greatest lesson for me, and I think for everybody else, to know that we're on the winning side and that we win in the end.
So,
and Josh, just before you go, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we're there.
Okay. I saw an awesome comment. I just want to address it. It comes from Curly May Q on Facebook. But tired of all the shit. I'm old. I fucking love that. I'm with you. I'm tired of all the shit too. I'm tired. I hear you.
But that's the thing, is what Len was just saying, is that the process is that light is being sparked within people.
That's it.
That light will continue and that'll grow. Search for the light. Look for the light. If your world is surrounded by darkness, bring the light within inside you, because once it's inside you, darkness has no chance of ever succumbing to you. And I think that this is also that same aspect that we talk about with psychological warfare, is once you see it, once you see how it operates, once you see how it works, it can no longer affect you to that degree. Once you understand their playbook, once you understand how the realms of darkness operate in this world, you are above them. You are a target for them.
Yeah, you're not a target. Well, what did your parents, hopefully, what would be wisdom to give your children about how to deal with bullying? Is don't become a target for bullies. Yeah. All right. Now, that's easier said than done, but it's interesting. And here's my quick little anecdote on that. Like, I have these kids I teach I've been doing a lot in my martial arts studio lately and working with these kids. And a lot of these kids kind of came in like, they're probably getting bullied. They have no confidence, right? But then when they gain the confidence, they're not bullied anymore. No, they're just like, it's not because they went and just like crescent kicked everybody. It's because energetically something shifted in them and they're no longer viewed as an easy target by the bullies, right? So you start to wonder how much of the dynamic, and this is going to make sense when I'm talking about these cult dynamics in a second, just using the bully example to keep it simple, how much is the bully responsible for? And I'm not trying to talk about guilt. I'm not trying to talk like he's obviously responsible for being the asshole in the situation. I just mean, when you have the framework I'm talking about, that someone like a Bruce Lee would give you, or the warrior tradition would give you, they would say, oh, you're getting bullied? That's because you're an easy target. So the issue is not to go and ban bullying and have marathons for moms running against bullying, which won't do anything to stop bullying. And we need to create bullying awareness. I'm sure the human race is aware of bullies. Okay. That's not the way. The way is to create the psychological immunity in your child to where they are no longer a target for people who are, the reason they're bullying is because they themselves have a negative view of themselves. They have no confidence in themselves. If they had confident alpha people or sigma people or whatever your favorite Greek letter to ascribe to confident, strong people is, the reason they exist is because it's a psychological attitude that they have. Okay. It's an attitude. It's not genetic. It's an attitude that you adopt.
But that attitude is an expressive emotion. If we look at it like an attitude is a mindset. A mindset is a collaboration of an emotional state, a continuous emotional state. And what is that? At the fundamental level of who we are, that is a neurological state of expression. It is an oscillation of our neurological centers, and that is electromagnetic in nature, that is resonating out among us, our internal light. That's what confidence is, man. You know, I mean, my grandma told me, by the way, when someone needs, I told her I was getting, bullied in school. She goes, well, if someone needs their clock cleaned, clean it. The next day, I beat the piss out of this kid, and I was never bullied again in my life. And I've always told my kids, Mike Tyson's quote, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the nose.
Yeah.
And I said, if someone bullies you, if they put hands on you, punch them in the nose. And if they keep on coming at you, punch them again in the nose and keep on going. And my kids learned confidence early on, and I learned confidence early on, and I'm sure you did as well. But I realized a while back that what that was, it's not an idea inside my mind. It's an expression of who I am. And I think that that's important for the audience to understand, is that confidence is not an idea that you hold in your mind. It's not something that I'm working towards being more confident. It is an expression of who you are. It is your neurological centers firing at complete optimization. Just boom, boom. This is who I am.
And what are your neurological centers firing?
Electromagnetic energy.
And what is electromagnetic energy?
No, that's
it's the light.
It's the light. That's right.
We are light. So there you go. So, and God is light, we were told. Interesting. We can get to that. But think about this. Let's compare, because that's brilliant. And sometimes, yes, there does need to be a demonstration to the people around you of your confidence. Like, you always hope it doesn't get to that, but sometimes that is what it takes. I mean, I did have to do that a few times as well. And then, I wasn't picked on. But the real way to me is the attitude adjustment that just makes you not viewed as an easy target, right? And that doesn't mean you go into school dressed like John Rambo every day, although that'd be pretty badass, especially these days. But it just means that it's not something you can fake. So you can't pretend. You can't identify as someone that has confidence. This is the big.
Well, they sure in the hell do now.
They try, but it's not working. Okay. The only reason it works is because the whole school is doing that. It's a big play that everybody's agreeing to play. It's still fake though. It's not real. Okay.
Agreed.
So I'm talking about the real deal, the genuine article. Okay. And so if we compare bully, tyrant, and cult leader, what can we get out of that? And I'll pause because I think you want to say something. So go with that first.
Well, I was going to say, as you said, what is this? What does the alpha look like? What does that strong, confident man look like? Look at our current situation in the United States of America, those people are the ones being bullied. The strong, Sigma,
Oh, yeah.
Alpha, competent men, Elon, Donald Trump. These are the RFK. These are the ones who are being attacked by those who believe they have the moral high ground.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's always been so. Always.
Mhm.
And that's interesting. That's another key ingredient that I found out. And I went, wait a minute. There's something bigger going on here, where what happens when your society is no longer promoting those values of what it is to be a true, authentic, strong person, whether you're a man or a woman, right? Where are those values now? And this is, in the absence of those values, look at the craziness that we can get to. Look at the level that we can get to, right? And so let's look at this a little deeper. You got a bully, a tyrant, and a cult leader. This sounds like a joke. There's probably a joke we could get into.
Walk into a bar.
Walk into a bar, okay? But anyways, what's common amongst these types? Look at people, like typologies of people, right? Well, what's common?
A bully, a tyrant, and a cult
leader. Yeah. What comes to your head when you think, what are some common things that sort of exist with those three types?
Well, what they incur on other people is coercion, violence, and fear.
Right. There you go. And that's their behavior. That's what's manifest in the physical world around them, right?
Yep.
Now let's scale it deeper. What's going on within the bully, the tyrant, and the cult leader to produce that effect in their minds, to make them behave that way?
Well, it would have to be the same thing that's being expressed outwardly.
Right. And it's, well, obviously the outward of all of our actions in the world have a cause. There's cause and effect, right? If your child is misbehaving, it's probably not linked to the thing they're doing. There's probably something else causing that behavior. Maybe they just want to test you out. Maybe, like, there's a billion reasons we can come up with, but just to think like this, okay, that there's an origin to behavior. There's an origin to things. Tyrants don't just rise out of thin air. Bullies don't just exist in a vacuum. There's a reason for this. Okay. So if I talk about the bully, and when I talk to the kids class that I'm teaching, jujitsu to or whatever, I talk about what is driving the bully. What do they want from you? Because half the kids, they're traumatized by these kinds of people because they're like, I don't think like that. And I just don't understand what they want from me. They won't leave me alone. They keep picking on me and I did nothing to them. And they're seeing, and I see that questioning in their minds. And I'm like, look, just realize that they admire you. There's something in you that they see that they want. And they realize that they don't see that quality in themselves. And so they are trying to squash you to uplift themselves artificially, meaning they're playing a fake game of identifying as the alpha in the room when really they're the beta. They're the low little man syndrome person. That they could be saved from that mentality, but that's just the condition they're in. Well, what's different about that and some tyrant? Control freak. Look at the control freaks that we talk about that are driving this woke agenda and this Marxist, fascist, whatever agenda globally and locally. What creates these people? Why do they behave irrationally? Why do they openly and contradict themselves? Why are they so effortlessly able to lie, and almost to a point where they probably know they're lying, but they do it anyways? Like, we see these qualities of narcissists and these types of people, and we go, well, what is it? Well, if you get deep into the psychological literature, you can read, I can come up with some names, but there's a good book called The Betrayal of the Self. And there's an act that's taking place within these individuals where they literally betray the self. And I'm talking about the capital S self, not the selfish ego. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the true imperial kingdom of heaven within. Okay. When you betray that, when you betray God, right? Just to keep it, if you want to use that language, when you betray that inner kingdom, you do this. You can't escape the knowing that you've done this. And there's a guilt thing that happens sort of existentially. There's a guilt complex that you now can't escape from in your mind. So you need to like repress that, because that's pointing out the truth. Kind of like you see those street interviews with these woke nutcases, and it's an obvious contradiction, whatever argument they give. And then the speaker's like, yeah, but what about the contradiction? Like, what is a woman or whatever? And they melt down and they get vicious and they start smacking you and attacking and throwing Slurpees at you and stuff, right? The reason they're behaving like that is because that person is acting like that inner voice that they probably have, that they have suppressed, that's reminding them of the facts of reality. And we all have this built into us. This is also part of the basic settings package, is that there is a reality that we exist in. There is an objective reality that we exist in. We are subjectively experiencing that, but there are laws of that reality, right? If I step off the edge of a cliff, I'm gonna fall. I can pretend, I can identify as someone that doesn't fall when I step off a cliff.
I can fly.
It just won't, it just won't happen. So there's rules to the game. And I think this is supposed to be this way, especially if we take the optimization theory into effect here, right? But just to keep it on this track, there's a guilt that happens within these people that is so strong because they know they've betrayed themselves, okay? So what do? They murder the self. They shut it down. They do the cremation of care ritual on a personal level. They destroy that Holy Spirit voice or that still small voice or that inner self voice that otherwise would have guided them to a different conclusion. And then what they need to do is create the illusion in the people around them. So I'm thinking of these cult leaders. They have a false, distorted sense of reality because of this dynamic, okay? In order to create a cult, what you need to do is recruit other people who are also looking to escape reality and escape the truth and escape, their reason and that imperial voice within, and say, hey, forget the real shit. Let's play pretend together. I'm better at playing pretend than Jim Jones up the street or that guy up the street. So come to my cult. And people are like, you know what? I'm in, because I'd rather have someone give me a prescription for life, even if I know it's not real, even if I know it's fake. I'd rather that than face that true voice within that's calling you back, that's urging you back to center again, right? And so I think this dynamic starts to have, this is why there's a relationship, we call it the master-slave dynamic, right? There's a relationship between that wife that has Stockholm syndrome that keeps allowing her husband to physically abuse her, or on the other end of the spectrum, that husband that keeps allowing his wife to verbally or emotionally abuse him or whatever, or a child. Like there's this dynamic, or why an entire population of people would allow their dictator to constantly abuse them, right? And why we'd keep voting more dictators in. It's because of what Carl Jung said. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Why? Well, he just gave you the blueprint for why cults exist and why tyrants exist and why bullies exist, is because that's part of the evasion of self, evasion of soul, evasion of God process. Okay. And when you do that on a civilizational or societal level, you get tyranny, totalitarianism. I've just been calling it totalism, because totalism is the only way to go if you're there, because now that free spirited nature of you, that is the pioneering spirit of the West and America and everything else, that is now you're being told is Nazism or something. I don't know what they're trying to tell you. It's ridiculous. They're telling you that these good quality, what they're telling you is that the good in you, the light in you is the evil, and the darkness is the good. This is what they want, because they believe that. They did that cremation of care ritual on a personal level, and possibly in some weird dark cults as well, who sold their soul. You hear that rhetoric? Oh, they sold their soul to the devil, to the agent of evil. Well, you sold your soul. How did they do that? By the mechanism Carl Jung described, by evading the truth, by evading reality. Final point. You were talking earlier about religion and cults and what's the difference. All these cults and religions, I'm talking, let's say, forget about the freaky deaky spin-off ones, the originals, okay, that go back to the ancient world. All they were was different cults of interpretation. That's all they were. And you could say, just to sum it up, they all have their different take on it, their different arguments. And you go, well, what are they interpreting? Well, they're interpreting reality. They're interpreting nature, trying to figure out how is nature plugged in and turned on every day? How come it seems to stay, even though humans live and die for eons of time? This thing we call nature, the natural world, the movement of the heavens, the whole system, the universe, the cosmos, the entire thing keeps going. Where's it plugged in? I don't see the socket where nature's plugged in and the sun comes up and then goes down. I don't see that. So what do we do? And then, oh, there's this life and death thing. And then I'm aware of it and I can think about meaning and all these things. So these are just different aspects of what we call the mystery. Okay. And in mystery schools, before they got all corrupted and messed up, were originally about this study. They were about studying the nature of reality, the nature of life and death, the nature of consciousness, and many more questions about how this all comes together. That was the original goal of these religions and cults. The reason they got perverted was because on the pathway to asking those questions, too many human beings came up against the mystery and weren't able to solve it. There was no immediate answer to these questions. And there still isn't, as much as we like to think there is. There just isn't. It is a mystery. And we don't like that because there's this other part of us that's very survival oriented and very grounded and very practical that says, if I can't understand a thing, it's frightening to me. That's the motivation of fear, is the fact that you don't understand something. That's mostly
undefined,
right?
Scooby-Doo effect. Yep, Scooby-Doo effect.
And we all, what is I love that guy in the Batman movies. Like, we're always afraid of what we don't understand. Right. So this drove humanity insane, was the fact that we didn't have the final answers to these questions and couldn't be content to let it be a mystery. Because those were the wisest of us in history that came out and said, you know what? We've been top to bottom through all the ancient archives and libraries. We've communed with all the spirits and all the angels. And we've done it all, been there and back. And guess what? It's still a big fat mystery.
Still no fucking clue.
We still have no fucking clue.
Nobody knows. They don't even know.
No, there's things we can know, but the big questions, it's like they're there, but they're not. And so they went, hey, approach life from this perspective. There's what is in your control. There's what isn't. There's what you can know, and there's what isn't. Be okay with that. Be okay with that. It's a very stoic idea, right?
Yeah.
And others. And so you go, all right, but now when they're trying to solve inequality and solve the anxiety and the fear and the existential guilt and suffering that every human being experiences, and we're going to get the government, we're going to make the government so big, or the cult so big, that it will find the answers for us. It will address the fact that I'm shorter than the guy next door to me and I'm not as successful as he. They're going to equalize the playing field and make things fair for once and answer all my questions. And that's what these cultists are. That's why they're addicted to it. They're not addicted to it because they have all these fancy arguments and statistics or whatever. They're addicted to it because of this existential philosophical question that has existed in human beings since the beginning of time to this moment. And they just don't like that. And they don't like their bodies. They start to develop something called self-hate. They start to develop something called an antipathy to nature, which means they look at nature as evil, dark, scary, and uncontrollable, because nature is that constant reminder of truth and reality that says, the mystery will never be unfurled to you in this current modality, right? So that creates a rebellious attitude towards reality. And what do? We create an infinite level of genders and religions and cults and groups and things that we can do to escape this and pretend and create a world of pretend rather than a world of real, which the world of the real doesn't feel as secure as the world of pretend. And what's the old Ben Franklin quote about security and freedom? If you give up your freedom for security, you'll end up with neither.
Yeah.
It's one of the eternal lessons. So there you go.
So interesting points that you made there, because I want to kind of hone in on this aspect. So 1666, Sabbatai Zevi. People who out there on my show probably have heard of him. He was proclaimed to be the Jewish Messiah, proclaimed himself to be the Jewish Messiah in Eastern Europe, millions upon millions of followers. He followed the Lyrian Kabbalah. And basically that interpretation of the Lyrian Kabbalah stated that we don't have to wait for God to bring about divine prophecy. We are the divine light of God. We bring about the prophecy so God comes back. In the 1700s, a gentleman by the name of Jacob Franks was born. He goes through, becomes indoctrinated into Sabbatai Zevi's cult. Sabbatai Zevi's long dead. He claims that he is a reincarnated Sabbatai Zevi, and becomes the next leader and gets millions and millions of followers who believe everything he's saying. He moves to Hamburg, Germany. He gets introduced to the socialites in Hamburg, Germany. One of them being a guy by the name of Adam Weishaupt, the other one being Amschel Rothschild. These three collaborate, and they come up with an idea to infiltrate the secret societies of the world, the Masonic lodges, and they formed what's known as Sabbatean Frankism. Sabbatean Frankism kind of divulges around 1840 timeframe, Karl Marx timeframe, right before the European socialist revolutions in 1850. Zionism is created the political movement of Zionism is created in the late 1800s, which is nothing more than a rebirth of Sabbatean Frankism, but more of more of a dogmatic aspect of it.
I'll depart with you on that point, but the rest is I'll agree for sure.
Okay. So what we get with the Sabbatean Frankists is their whole perspective is to bring about prophecy on this planet. Right? To bring about God back. They are the ones who perpetuate the evil in the world so God comes back. Now think about them as the progenitors of the transhumanistic movement. What more slap in the face would God want than people producing their own self-created God of artificial intelligence, of people moving away from the biological to the synthetic, to the created?
Now, there's a bunch of tales woven together, and I totally see where you're going with it. And yeah, there's the whole Sabbatean Frankist movement, which, by the way, was denounced by most of the people that were around those circles because they saw this dynamic. Then you got to get also into the other layers to this, because Sabbatai Zevi didn't evolve out of a vacuum either, just like Karl Marx didn't. And by the way, Karl Marx was Jewish and wrote a book on the Jewish question, which is rather interesting, which starts the whole dovetail about what does it mean to be, all these things, but that's a whole other podcast. You have to also realize that we can go even bigger than this, because this would be basically hyper-focusing on Judaism as being the spawn of where all of this came from. But the fact of the matter is, where did the Jews get housed in slavery for 400 years?
Well, supposedly in Egypt.
In Egypt, right? Supposedly. But historically, if you bring Ralph Ellis on, is there a difference between the Jews and the Israelites?
Mm-hmm.
There would be, right?
Yeah.
The Israelites would have been a royal caste from what would have been known as the Hyksos. Okay. Yep. But that's I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I just want to show people that this goes even bigger than just one single thread that people tend today to be hyper-focused on. It's far bigger. It's actually worse than we think, because what I'm saying is that this pestilence, what you're talking about there with the Sabbatai Zevi cult of this, and he was a freaky black magician, and brought those ideals in and basically played around with the dark side of mysteries, okay, and brought them in. And these Illuminists and all of them, they were playing with this archive of ancient knowledge. But those were just the little peons, okay? The forces that I've been looking at for a while now, and we've been doing this a lot on Unslaved, is these are types of people and orders and cults that go into all civilizations of humanity, which tells us something. It's not going to work for us to try to identify the origin of evil with one group or another. We're going to have to think bigger. We're going to have to get into the individual level of what's driving all of this. So what drove a Sabbatai Zevi? What drove a Stalin? What drove an Adam Weishaupt? What motivated them to even be a part of these activities in these cults as individuals, right?
Well,
What motivates? What's that?
We just talked about it.
We just talked about it.
It's exactly what you just said.
Exactly. And then when that kind of mind, that polluted mind, and they come from all, I could go into the history of the Vatican, which would make the history of Israel and all that look like a little nothing compared to that, the story that we could get into to unravel it. But what corrupted that order as well? The same goddamn thing.
Mhm.
And what corrupted, I even did a thing on Tibetan Buddhism. We did this on Earth Chronicles.
Earth Chronicles.
The dark side of Tibetan Buddhism that they're all kind of like unnoticed over there in Tibet in the mountains with their pedophile cults that nobody wants to talk about. Okay. And their connections to Keith Rainier and Nexium and a lot of the stuff going on. And even all the Illuminati symbols that everybody likes to talk about with the hand signs, that comes from Buddhist mantras and hand yogas that go from the East, the mudras. Yeah. So all that shit, every part of history and every culture has been affected by the same pestilence in one way, shape, or form. So what I'm here to tell you is that unfortunately, the report is not, oh, we just got a few bad apples that rose up in the 1700s and we just got to rout out their bloodlines and we're good to go. Nope, won't do it. The fact of the matter is, this is something that has affected the entire human species. Yep. This is a disease that can affect the human mind, and it's rooted in what we were talking about with the whole existential thing. This goes down to the individual level. And then those individuals, let's imagine, Josh, for a second, and this will help explain cult dynamics. Let's take the deepest, darkest Epstein Island cult, whatever, Abramovich, whatever cult you can think of, the worst of the worst, okay? Human sacrifice, what drives that shit, right? What drives that? An antipathy to nature and a hatred of the self on just a psychological level. And that's leaving out any paranormal explanations we could talk about. But just to keep it human for a minute, or anti-human, what turns a human anti-human, right? What inspires the Club of Rome, which has its links to the Rome and the Vatican, by the way, what inspires them to write manifestos on how we have to exterminate 70+% of the human population in order to survive as a species? What drives that? And why do people join that cult? Well, everybody joining a cult is still an individual. And that means that there was something in them that attracted them to that philosophy, right? Just like the leftists today or the crazy neo-Nazis today would pick your extremist. Doesn't matter. They're motivated by something else. And this is why I go, if we're going to be advocating in this freedom movement for freedom, sovereignty, the rights of the individual, or even the idea that something called an individual exists, which is something new in the world, by the way, okay? Then why are we so quick to cast collective judgment? Right? And is that the way? So I could say, all right, pick a cult, and it's that cult that does that. Well, it's the Satanists, right? It's the Satanists who are running the whole show. Okay. And let's pick on them. Okay. Which branch of the Satanists? The local Satanists that are just into Marilyn Manson and just want to be rebellious, and they don't really do anything great. They're just kind of dark goth people, like those kind of Satanists. Or are we talking about like ancient Setians that are aligned to ancient blood rituals that go back thousands of years? Are we talking about them? And actually, what is the difference? Right? And should we look at these people as groups, as this like when people talk conspiracy stuff, they talk of like this monolithic group that's controlling the world, right? But remember, there's a dynamic of master and slave. None of those people, if they are there and running the world, would have any power unless the world somehow was supporting them indirectly or directly. There's no way a small little group could control the world otherwise, right? So this means that when we analyze this stuff, we have to try to do it in a way where we realize that I'm an individual analyzing this, and those are individuals that were brought into the doors of this cult, indoctrinated or whatever, but that everybody has their own internal motivation for doing so. And so is the solution just to get rid of, let's say we drain the swamp. This is where I'm trying to get to with this. Let's say we drain the swamp. Let's say Trump gets reelected in America. He goes in and finishes the job he couldn't do in the first term, and he just drains the swamp, and everybody gets arrested, and we've got Nuremberg 2, and boom, we rout out the current modern incarnation of the people who've been infected by this disease of the mind. What's to stop another crop of people becoming infected with the same disease and then rising up over time again, and then overthrowing a great civilization once again, as it's happened countless times in human history.
I was about to say, this is why at the end of every dark age, you go into a golden age.
And then back to the dark age.
Back to the dark age. And
right?
It takes some time, but you go through these 90-year cycles, up and down, and they're generational. And then why? Because you have to weed out those bad seeds, per se, because in perspective, it's social and cultural that is bringing it about. It is. So you asked, how could one group of small people, have control over the whole world? Well, nature aside, human nature, they can focus on it. They focus on human nature by controlling and dominating social constructs and in culture. Well, now it becomes incredibly easy. So take the Catholic Church, for instance, the Holy Roman Church, right? I mean, the Roman Empire spread thousands upon thousands of miles in every direction. And what happened? 375 AD, we had Constantine who said, hey, to his generals, we can't control the people 1,000 miles away. What are we going to do? We can't collect the tax. The governors are getting their lands overrun. What do we have to do? Well, we have to create a basis of fear to keep them in check. We have all of these people worshiping all these different religions and philosophies. What if we utilize that against them? And there's this new derivation of something coming about called Christianity. Let's take all of that, put it together, and we control and manipulate that to a level of control, and then we put the church on top to dominate over that. And it worked like a fucking charm.
Yeah, he's like, let's create a new cult that's kind of already happening organically. And then let's take maybe the more pure tenets of the original cult and just twist it a little bit. And boom, you've got the perfect bowl of mashed potatoes or whatever, right? Well, so this is how they do it. Now, this is interesting. I've been doing this thing on, I've just been calling it totalism, just because everybody's always like confused about what the goal for the world is with this new world order thing. Is it a communist takeover? Is it a fascist takeover? Is it this faction? Is it that faction? Is it the Jews doing it? Is it the Catholics? Is it the aliens? Is it the reptilians? Like it's on and on and on, right? And it's probably like, yeah, it's probably everything. But here's the thing. What we're seeing is a competition going on between different cults.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all we're seeing. Like even if I said to you, like, socialism as a political philosophy was not born in the social political sphere. It was born in the cult sphere of secret orders that go back thousands of years that have the similar ideas then as they do today. And that what they did is massage that into the social political body, right, over time. And we can look at a lot of other isms that happen the same way. There's even, I've got a book here talking about occult feminism, right? And all these there's an occult side there's a secret side to these stories. They don't just pop out of nowhere. And so you start to go, all right, so we got competing ideas. Well, what are the origins of these ideas? Well, they come from these various traditions. Some of them are more culty, some of them are just more philosophical. And these power players at the top, let's just say whoever they are, they come from many backgrounds, by the way. Yes. Everybody needs to know this. But what unites them? They probably hate each other as much as they hate us, but they'll work together to get an agenda forward because they can't do it alone. So what they'll do, they're united in a pursuit of power and domination. What motivates someone to see the world like that? That the only satisfaction they're going to have in life is to create a generational plan for world domination. Like who among us has that drive? Well, what if I told you any one of us has the potential to have that drive? Thank God most of us don't, but there are people that do have that, and they are united in that. So the Bloods and the Crips might join hands for a while in order to thwart the police system or the government system to avoid detection, right? And then once that's dealt with, they'll go back to fighting each other, right? Or the Sicilian mafia versus the New York mafia. They'll fight each other one day and then join hands for another day to take on a greater enemy. Yep. Well, isn't that kind of what's happening on the good side as well right now? Where because of the situation we're in, aren't we kind of joining forces with some pretty evil regimes, but in a weird way, you kind of have to because we have worse shit coming. The White Walkers are at the door. You know what I mean?
So, dude, So I've been talking about this for years. I've had many shows. Multi-headed Hydra. That's what I've always talked
Yes,
about.
that's a better
The
term. Yeah.
multi-headed Hydra. You got different heads of the Hydra. Each one is its own faction. Each faction has its own ideology. And they're all battling each other in a war of the roses. And I've been talking about it that Trump made deals with some of these other factions. Why? Because there's certain factions that we can see by what's unfolding in front of us are being eliminated. That, hey, you guys, you got too powerful. You did some crazy shit. Your whole illegal empire, it's not going to stick anymore. You got to go. And that's the pedophiles and the darks. There's a lot of Satanism that is being eliminated right now. And why? Well, because all of these other ones, these other factions, they might not be the best in the world. They might not be for the best of humanity, but they're seeing an opportunity to join with Trump's faction and seize power, right? Because now they can implement their ideals for the agenda that is about to be perpetuated. Now they
might just be doing it for survival too.
Well, yeah, they might be doing it for survival. So I look at it as the multi-headed Hydra, and I think you're spot on with this, is that you're absolutely right. Now, I want to point out something.
Sure.
So the left, they utilize a lot of projective propaganda, right? Projection. But there was something they called out in the MAGA movements, and I agree with them, is that MAGA is moving towards a direction of Christian nationalism. Now, some people might think that that's not a bad thing. It's a very bad thing, people. I want you to understand that undermines the constitutional contract with our government. It undermines the personal and individual freedoms of the First Amendment, okay? But you're right. What has happened? Ideological centers are trying to take over these large, influential movements.
100%. They are. And they have to. Because that's the only play left. And also, don't forget, Josh, the thing motivating all those individuals to move to a much more extreme reaction to another extreme is due to trauma. Trauma-based mind control. Think about it. We've been in a Skinner box for what? Like, I mean, you could say 4 years, you could say 7 years. You can pick your starting line. I think it's just revolving, but let's just go recent history, okay? I don't think the vast majority of people survived psychologically what happened from 2020. And I see the evidence around me where close friends of mine who were very steadfast, very astute, very knowledgeable, they would sit here nodding to most of what we've been talking about one day, and then they have literally gone over the deep end. I've watched it happen. I've shed some tears for friends of mine who have gone so absolutely insane that they're just not the same people, and they've ruined their marriages, they've ruined their relationships, and now they're stuck psychologically on a loop and they can't get out of it because the dark side won. They did not have that zest for life. They did not have the spiritual and psychological fortitude to get through this war. And I don't even blame them, and I love them to death. But it took the toll, and we lost many soldiers on the battlefield psychologically. They're still walking around pretending like they're fighting, but they're not. They lost internally. Now I'm hoping to resurrect. I'm hoping they find that fortitude and listen to that inner voice and get back on the online, but that's up to them. There's something that is part of the psychological warfare playbook, and we need to see this as psychological warfare. Okay. So there's two forces happening that's producing all this insanity and these extremes we're talking about. One is, yes, the hand of tyranny, the black hand, the dark side of the force that's trying to grab power and use the knowledge they have of human psychology, the nature of reality, symbolism, etc., to manipulate the masses to follow the agenda. Okay. That's always been around, and it's obviously happening now on steroids. There's that, but there's also the other side that greets them, which is the people that are the reason the propaganda is effective. Let me put it that way. You can have someone who's like that analogy you were giving about the light in the room of darkness. When you don't go into the room with light and you're just in the darkness, you're going to drive yourself mad if you don't have a light to find in that darkness. Right. And that's what I see with these people. Now, with propaganda and weapon, 5th generation psychological warfare, one of the main aspects of that playbook is something called reality distortion. A very simple process. Think of even a manipulator or a narcissist in your life that you've dealt with. What do? Something happens, and then they re-script back to you what happened. And the thing that happens was they were abusive to you, or they stole money for you, or they lied about you to a friend, or they did something that was very manipulative. And then when you go to confront them on it, they recount what happened, but all the missing pieces are their responsibility in what happened, right? This is what's happening. They're gaslighting.
Or it's all your fault.
It's all your fault. It's projected on you.
Yeah.
Like the government of Canada is making it look like the reason why our country is so messed up and our economy is so messed up. They're blaming Canadian citizens and blaming other political parties. So you see this dynamic, and what are they doing? They're distorting reality. And only someone that has that light shining in their mind can go, you're full of shit. You're gaslighting me. And here's where it was. But there's a lot of people that even if they see that, they don't have the strength to confront it and fight it and win. They don't have that. They're not fighters. And so they lose psychologically and they succumb to the programming. And then there's another layer. And then the whole time, I'm telling you, there's that part of you that's guilty inside because you're selling your soul. There's a part of you that knows you're giving up and you're tapping out. And then that compounds. And then you can't handle that. And so you just need to suppress it. And then the recipe has been achieved. Then you think, okay, well, so we got reality distortion. Then we go to the Yuri Bezmenov playbook that he warned America about in the 80s when he was interviewed by G. Edward Griffin. He was, of course, the KGB defector that came over to expose the whole thing. There's a reason the playbook is known. All right. And so Yuri Bezmenov said it's 4 stages, right? Demoralization, destabilization, introduce a crisis, emergency consciousness, and then create the solution. And it's always a false one. So when we now understand how that works, this is also how cults operate, which is why I'm so eternally fascinated by it. Because if we see these little like test tubes, which are these cults, and we try to find out what made that work, what made that successful, we can also understand what made the takeover of these tyrants in the West successful, or think of any country. It's the same process. And then we can develop the immunity to it. So you just got to see the magic trick for what it is. It's not real magic. It's deception. It's reality distortion. The magic trick is happening in your consciousness and the way you're viewing reality. It's not actually happening in the physical reality around you, but you think it is. And that's how they get away with it. So to wrap up this little segue, I would just say that what would help people now in this war is to start to study the playbook a little more. We talk about the playbook. We talk about how these things happen. But if we dive in a little deeper, we learn a lot about, the way all of this darkness works, but we also learn a lot about ourselves, and also, most importantly, the solution to it, which is that when I read these testimonies of people who've sort of become unindoctrinated from various cults, I look to them as a good point of analysis, because they always say the same things. They always talk about that process of seeing through the lie and realizing the guy was or the cult leader or the whatever was crazy. And it's this process. And I think we're all kind of going through that. And the problem is a lot of people don't make it on that journey. And we have to have eternal empathy for that. But how do those of us who still have it together actually pull off a win now? Because our ranks are shattered. We're divided within. We're fighting more with each other than we are with the actual enemy at this point. This is how I see it, which is why I've kind of pulled back a little bit, because I'm seeing that, there's a lot of this psychological content coming out, and it's healthy. It needs to happen. And I've had it too. Like, I'm not like some guy who's immune from all this. I'm experiencing this also. Okay. But where do we go from here? And I wanted to know what your take is. From where we are right now, it is October 25th. We are weeks away from an election. We know it's going to start to get absolutely insane. It's going to keep picking up. Given all this information we've been talking about, if any of it's legit, where do you see us going now, and what do we do next? What do you think? It's a big one, but take a shot.
a long time ago, I was with one of the people who first kind of introduced me to the occult and esoteric, and was one of my teachers, if I want to look at it like that. And he said to me, with everything coming in the world, there's one thing that you have to do. And I said, what's that? And he goes, survive. He says, don't fight, don't join in, don't get dirty, as in don't fall for the deception. Right? Don't be the foot soldier in someone else's army, but survive. He said, because after the chaos, he goes, chaos is not something that anybody can control. What happens is order out of chaos derives from the fact that the predicate for chaos was set up ahead of time, to where when the chaos evolves, the solutions after the fact are already in place because they were the ones that produced the original cause. The chaos, though, still is something that is uncontrollable. The destabilization of an optimized state, right? It's something that's uncontrollable. And so as you come out of the chaos, the system is looking, how do I get back to normalcy? How do I get back to balance? And that's when those factions come in and say, guys, we got the solution. Look, 15-minute cities. Look, we're going to centralize population into these, right? This is their plan. This is what they're going to do after the chaos. And he said to me, survive, because after is when it begins. After is when it starts. While you're all here is after. Survive. Because when you survive and you're there after the chaos, the people who are lost, the people who don't understand, the people who don't know, you become that leader. You become that shining light, that guidance in the darkness. And to me, that's most important right now. And to me, that's what I'm looking at, is how to survive what is coming, but also set up the foundation for what happens after. I mean, I wrote a post today on X, and I truly 100% believe this. And as scary as this is, I was talking about it in my Red Pill Daily Brief for everybody out there who watches those. You can go listen to it, but I want to read this because I think it's quite important to understand it. It's that one right there. If Trump wins, there will be every attempt to stop the inauguration, including the possibility of assassination attempts, false flags, martial law, jailing Trump, World War III, economic collapse, anything and everything that would allow them to seize power. The timing of this would be slow at first, would ramp up to January 6th. This would be their final stand. If their efforts to stop Trump on January 6th fail, then expect absolute chaos before January 20th. If by chance Trump is inaugurated on January 20th, the same precedent follows. They will do everything within their means to stop Trump at every effort they get. They will scorch this earth before they ever lose complete power. Now, if by chance Kamala wins, repeat everything I just said above, but speed up the timeline. The revolution is inevitable at this point. They know it. We know it. This is why they already tried with 2 assassination attempts, and they will try again. And then, so Mel K, I had Mel K on last night. She said, she has this quote, and I love it. She says, it's not that they are after you and Trump is in the way. It is they are after the world and America is in the way. And I think there's so much truth to that, because that's their objective. World domination. Europe's already fallen. The Asian continent, I mean, it's already fallen, right?
The game has worked everywhere. Yeah.
It's worked everywhere, but here. This is the last.
And it's funny. It's so interesting because it worked to a degree in America, but there was still just enough of an ingredient of understanding freedom and the pursuit of knowledge and the drive, like I was saying, to live life in spite of everything. That's very much the Western American spirit, right?
Yeah.
Just enough of that alone, because a lot of people would sit here, especially the leftists, would go, yeah, but look at the military industrial complex and the corruption and the Bushes and all the Halliburtons and the evils in America and the horrible things. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, all light casts a shadow. Okay. Like,
And I'd be like, and Bush and Cheney just endorsed Kamala. So
Yeah,
what's your fucking point?
exactly. Which is hilarious and kind of gives
Yeah.
it away, doesn't it? But here's what I'm trying to say. On just a macro level, think about it. It's ideas that made America.
Mhm.
It was the people, but it's that because it's the best ideas that win. What ideas promote human freedom, advancement, progress, prosperity, security? What are the best ideas? Well, we've got plenty of data to figure out what's the best ideas for human thriving and peace and all that. We already know. We don't have to reinvent it. It's just that there was enough, we were lost, we were infiltrated, right? Of course. But even with the deep state and the evil and the whole thing, it's still the envy of the world. It's still the only bastion left for human freedom. Okay. And I find that interesting. Now, I love what you said there about, I just wanted to say, I really loved your answer. I love that you talked about surviving the chaos because the real thing starts after. Okay. Quick little story, because this was going to be my answer. I'm going to give you the martial art experience here. It's because it's what I've been doing mostly lately. I have students that come in, and I was one of these students too, where you come in, you don't know jack, and you're soft and you're kind of weak and you're frail and you're like a little baby deer the first time you go into a martial arts program. Okay.
Mhm.
And then over time, we see who's going to stick with the process, who's got what it takes to upgrade and optimize themselves. Because what it takes to upgrade and optimize yourself and gain this skill and knowledge is going to be a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of chaos that you're going to have to survive. And what does that do? But the pressure you're going to experience on your path is going to blow your mind, but it's also going to forge you. You're going through a forging process. And a lot of people don't realize that when they're losing on the mats and they're not doing well and they're getting destroyed and they're beaten up and they're getting drained out, they don't realize that that's the necessity. That's what they need in order for me to produce somebody that's capable of doing this at a high level. So when someone walks in new and they go, why can't I have any measure of success against that blue belt over there, that 130-pound girl that's just beating the shit out of me and choking me out every 2 seconds? How come I can't even touch her? And I'm a, 200-pound bodybuilder, right? And I'm like, well, because you haven't really been forged in the fire yet, and she has. That's really the only difference, right? Or he or whoever. And the reason I'm bringing this example up is that everybody that has survived to a point, it doesn't mean you're not riddled with bullet holes and scars and wounds, okay? In fact, you probably are. If you've survived to this point in this war that we're in, the psychological, spiritual war of our times, the great, as Laura Lee calls it, the battle of the black gates, that's happening, right? If you're here and you survived the biggest propaganda experiment in human history, if you survived that, you're a fucking black belt.
Yep.
Do you understand? You earned your bullet holes. You earned the muscles that you have. You earned the skills that you have. You earned the courage that you now have that you didn't have before 2020 or 2016 or whatever your date is of when you finally became a warrior. You don't know you just became a warrior. Welcome to the battlefield, right? So you are like a cockroach that can, no, don't mean that in a negative sense. You're going to survive anything. You're going to survive anything. You're just too indestructible now. It's impossible. And you have to think like this, and you got to live like this, and you got to behave like this. Don't be something you're not. If you've survived to this point, pat yourself on the back, right? And realize that, yes, it's going to get harder, but you are harder. You are stronger. That's the message. There's a reason for this. There's a meaning behind it. That's what I learned from reading people that survived gulags, okay? And survived horrors that I don't even think we can quite understand. Even though we're going through the crazy time we are, like I say, we get to fight this war at home in our pajamas, most of us, right? So think of past civilizations. Think of the fall of the Roman Empire, what that must have been like, right? Think of history. So, Genghis Khan surviving that. Like, if you can survive what we've just gone through and you can still be here tuning into a show like this, trying to learn more and trying to stay in the fight for freedom, truth, and justice to return to these lands, you are forged as a warrior. You're knighted now. Okay. So act like it. Stop pretending like the deep state and the Illuminati and the New World Order are these big, powerful entities. They're nothing. They're nothing. They're little pits of lint compared to what you've become, being forged in the fire. I'm talking on a spiritual, psychological level, because the types of people that are involved in these coups and in these experiments and in these takeovers and in this conspiracy, they don't have even anything close to that level of resolve, resilience. They might have brilliance, they might have resolve in other areas, but they are not to be looked at as this monolithic, all-powerful, all-knowing. It's they're under every bed.
That's part of the psychological warfare.
It 100% is, man. It 100% is. So don't believe that lie. You're bigger than you know. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and I like a lot of the, Jews running and control the world and everything like that. Propaganda is, look, there's a truth to that, but that's not the truth. Truth to it, but that's not the truth. We talked to David Icke about this, the web of deceit and deception and what's really at the center of that web. And to be honest, right now, I don't think that really matters. What matters is that you do not succumb to the deception.
Yeah.
That you keep on forging through. You be that steel and you be forged into that massive ninja sword that's going to shred through its enemies, right? We have to survive through the chaos. It is after this chaos that both sides become incredibly vulnerable. Both sides. Their side is going to be just as vulnerable as our side. It is there where you strike, because when you get through that and you are not the victim to the deception, you have the strength. And from that strength, you can rise. And from that rising, the knowledge is spread. The understanding is spread. What you have and what you just went through now becomes knowledge, right? It now becomes adopted by the human consciousness. And it expands to defeat their power and their rule. And I think that this is truly the route that we're taking right now, that we were talking about. There's factions being eliminated. Are these bad factions? Yeah, there's some evil motherfuckers that are being that their factions are being dismantled and eliminated. Are there factions that are still in existence and still in power? Yeah, Israel. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. Maybe they will. I don't know. But as of right now, you have everybody in the world supporting them, but a few BRICS nations, right? So there's factions that are still going to be here tomorrow.
There's also the possibility that there might be something going on there that nobody wants to hear yet. They're not ready for it, to know what's really happening in Israel right now. But that's a different podcast. But either way, you're right. Yeah. Here's the thing. I ultimately think that if we wanted to, because this is Friday Night Fringe, right?
Yeah.
So we got to do a little bit of this. What if what's really running this matrix of control is not human? And what if that's actually our advantage? Just something to think about, because and not human, you can take that any way you want. We could go fringe and go, we're talking non-human intelligences, otherworldly, other dimensional beings. We could get into that, or we could even just say we've got humans in quotes that are operating in a non-human mentality, right? Which is why they're producing non-human behavior and agendas, right? It doesn't really matter how you want to look at that, but whichever version of that we're dealing with, it actually tells you something, that there's something unique about human consciousness. There's something unique about it. Yes, there's its pitfalls, the fact that we're so profoundly naive and we're so easily led, and we were probably conditioned and raised as slaves for decades and centuries, millennia. It's probably programmed into our genetics to be on our knees, worshiping and being whipped by something over us, right? But all that to be said, we have a track record of great brilliance, genius, optimization, etc. In spite of everything, in spite of that evil, in spite of that non-human agenda. There's something valuable about us, which is otherwise nothing would be messing with us this way, right? Like if we just,
agree.
the other thing I think about often, I want you to take on that and this one final thing about the whole globalist and the depopulation thing. There's two theories to why they haven't quite gotten away with it all, like why they don't get a 90+% reduction in the human population, right? They've had some reductions, especially when you look at the track record of what's going on, but it's never fully hit off. One thing could be, okay, we got divine intervention. Maybe there's something that's stopping it from happening. Maybe there's human agency involved behind the scenes that's stopping that from getting to the, this is what we've speculated a lot about the white hats. There's people in all areas of human industry that are fighting back. And so that's sort of slowed the process. But there's another possible theory that might be propaganda simply to be held as a whip of fear because they actually value human consciousness, whatever this is, which is why it is being farmed in the way that it is, right? Which, yeah, that's kind of dark and scary too, but it means there's a value to whatever this consciousness is that we have and whatever this life is that we have. And which means there's also a reason why that agenda to contain that human consciousness and farm it or abuse it has to be secret, is because they're afraid of us finding out, which means we're powerful enough to do something about it if we did find out, right?
Or the knowledge of us finding out, whatever we gained, cures our ancient amnesia.
Oh yeah, right? And then that's the Great Awakening.
And then that's the Great Awakening, and then they become powerless against us.
Right. Well, there you go. It'd be like, okay, a bunch of robbers break into your home at night. You hear a bang at 3 a.m. and glass broken, and there's you hear some hushed voices, and you're like, holy shit. But they think they have the advantage because they've got weapons. They're scary. They think, oh, if the homeowner wakes up, we can totally just, deal with that. But maybe they don't know that all of your next door neighbors have just been woken up, and the whole neighborhood is about to come to this house with pitchforks and take care of them, right? I kind of see that as this deep state is trying to finish off Western civilization right now and get their agents in our governments and do all these dirty deeds and get out anybody that's trying to do good, right? They think that they've got this place cinched. They planned the perfect crime. They think they've already got away with it. They've been raised in these cults to indoctrinate them to think that they represent the most powerful force in the universe. And so therefore they're untouchable. They think they're better than us. They think all these things, but they're about to get a rude awakening when they actually realize that they messed with the wrong tigers here. Yeah. And that all of their machinations and all of this psychological warfare, a lot of people have fallen on the battlefield, but those of us that didn't are going to rise up. Like, that poem that was going around on the boards years ago, which is just an old story. I think it was like a war hero that told it about what a dangerous animal an awakened man is, or something, or like, what was that? You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I'll pull it up.
You know what I'm talking about. It was like, the man that wants to be left alone.
The man who wants to be left alone.
There you go.
Right now.
Think of that. Let's read that, because think of like some John Rambo that was just trying to go through. I'm just passing through. Don't bother me. And they can't resist bothering him, and they wake up the wrong tiger. This is a great tale. This is how I see it right now.
Yeah. Hold on. I gotta. Shit. What just happened?
It's the most terrifying force. I think that's what they call it. The most terrifying.
Yeah, the most terrifying force. Yep. The most terrifying force of death comes from the hands of men who wanted to be left alone. They try so very hard to mind their own business and provide for themselves and those they love. They resist every impulse to fight back, knowing the forced and permanent change of life that will come from it. They know that the moment they fight back, their lives as they have lived them are over. The moment the men who wanted to be left alone are forced to fight back, it is a form of suicide. They are literally killing off who they used to be, which is why, when forced to take up violence, these men who want to be left alone fight with unholy vengeance against those who murdered their former lives. They fight with raw hate and a drive that cannot be fathomed by those who are merely play acting at politics and terror. True terror will arrive at these people's door, and they will cry, scream, and beg for mercy, but it will fall upon deaf ears of the men who just wanted to be left alone.
And I mean, it's a good one. It's a dramatic one. It comes from a time, before our time. But, and I would actually take that and just tell everybody, especially if we got anybody listening in here, that I'm not using that as a way of saying we need to take it literally and go, oh, that means we're called to some kind of violent revolution or something like that. That is playing into the enemy's hands. Let me make that crystal clear. They would love that for that opportunity to get everybody riled up to a point where they can get a fight in the streets and all that kind of stuff. This is not what I'm not talking about, violent uprising revolution. That's not, but the mentality behind that statement applied on a consciousness level. Let's just take that into more of a metaphorical understanding of it. Think of the power of that. We were all those people, weren't we? Just wanted to be left alone. That's what produced the Patriot movement. This is what the left doesn't understand. They started the fight. We just want to be left alone. And now people have gone through the pain. People have gone through pain. Maybe all that warning about pain is coming. Pain is coming. And it's not just for the deep state. It's the pain that we need to experience so that future generations don't experience it, so that it's built into our cellular memory, so that it doesn't happen again, or at least not for a long time. And that what's awakening in us, and what's, to me, what that's speaking about is that lion in us, that warrior spirit is being activated, because you don't become like real warriors didn't select warriorship as their path in life. They selected, I just want to be a gardener. I just want to take care of my family. I just want to be left alone. I just want to live my life. They became warrior. Like, think of Braveheart as a great movie as like an archetype, right? Speaking of Mel Gibson, who just had that brilliant, she's got the IQ of a fence post on Kamala. Anyways, Braveheart, where he's coming back to his lands in Scotland after his crusade, and all the clans are trying to get him to be the leader of their new political movement or whatever to overthrow the British rule. And he's like, nah, if I can live in peace, I will. And he's just trying to go about fixing up his little house, and he wants to marry the girl he loves. He just wants to move on with his life. And then what happens? He just wants to be left alone.
They kill his wife.
They kill his wife in a ritual fashion in front of everybody to make an example. And suddenly he becomes that terrifying force of death that never let him.
Mel Gibson has played this before too. The Patriot.
The Patriot.
They killed his son. He came back from the war. He just wanted to be left alone. They kill his son. He gets his axes out. And
that's right. And that's why I love those statements. I think it was Jordan Peterson or something that was talking about a good man is a dangerous man. And he's actually echoing Musashi. I don't know if he knows it, but Musashi talked about this, like the warrior path, like to be good, to be the good one that upholds value, virtue, human life, upholds the town, the village, the community, the society. These are the people that are wanting, their mode of life is peace and prosperity. That's what they want. They want to live a successful life, and they want to live in peace. But they just so happen to be sophisticated badasses that you don't want to mess with, because when you awaken that drive in them to push them up against the wall where they have no choice, they will be motivated. Remember that battle at Falkirk, I think it was one of the battles in Braveheart, where they were outnumbered. They had heavy cavalry. The British had heavy cavalry. And these are just a bunch of farmers and whatever that are sitting there with a bunch of sticks that have pointers on, right? And they're like, they are many, we are nothing. And he's like, yeah, but those guys are all paid to fight. You guys are fighting because you know it's either this day or the next that they're going to kill you anyways. And they're going to come and keep raping and pillaging your villages. And you are fighting for survival. You are fighting for what you believe in. You're fighting for your families, your villages, your town. You have a reason to fight. And men that have a reason to fight are going to annihilate greater numbers than them of enemies that are paid, mind-controlled NPCs any day of the week. So the NPC consciousness won't survive. It won't survive because it's not built to survive. The type of consciousness that's going to survive is this type of consciousness we're talking about.
And this is why they say in the Bible that the meek shall inherit the earth. The meek isn't meant as defined by modern Christianity as the weak. The meek are those battle-ridden that come back and choose the easy life. They choose to be the farmer. They choose to be the retail clerk, the florist.
Yeah.
But they are the ones who are battle-hardened that come back and choose the path of peace, but know the path of violence.
That's it. You must. If you want peace and you want freedom, if you want freedom in this world, and I'm talking not just freedom from the government. What is the government but the representative of the crowd, of the masses, right? And the high table. If you want freedom in this world, you better be a lion. You better be dangerous. And I'm talking dangerous in your ability to have your wits about you, psychological empowerment, knowledge, the ability to be eloquent with facts, the ability to, like there's many fields of battle here. We're using the metaphor of like physical combat, but it's not even really fought there, right? And even in the realm of physical combat, the battle isn't really won with just physicality. It's built with who's got the best strategy, who's the smartest, who's got the most resilience, who wants it most, right? And so who wants it most, America? Who wants it most? Canada and the world, the Western world right now? Who's the beacon of light, the only thing left standing? Who wants it most? That's the question of our time.
Well, and I think that it's all coming to this precipice, to this apex. I think that that this November 5th, I think really is that point.
It's a dividing line for sure.
It is a dividing line, and it marks the beginning. And like I said, it doesn't matter if they steal it. It doesn't matter if Kamala wins. It doesn't matter if Trump wins. It doesn't matter. That is the defining point. This is the moment that you've heard it, the moment you've all been waiting for. That is it, November 5th. And look, after that day, it begins.
Yeah.
That's the key you have to understand. It begins. Now, I also think, going back to what you're talking about with non-human intelligence, all that, is I do think that the different factions on this planet, I think that they know something. And I think that they have information. Now, I don't know if you heard Luis Elizondo recently.
I did, yeah.
He was talking about how they're preparing for something. Now, he was supposed to testify November 13th with this new whistleblower that's talking about Immaculate Conception.
In November?
Okay? In November 13th. Now, the DOD has intervened and are trying to get them to cancel it. The DOD does not want them to have this hearing. Now, this whistleblower that has recently come forward, I don't know if he knows Luis Elizondo. That's the first time I've heard of Luis Elizondo say anything about that they're coming. Now, this actually coincides with a few other things some former CIA guys have said, that they're coming. They'll be here in 2026. Okay? 2026, they're coming. Daddy's returning. Okay? Now, I've heard that. Now I'm hearing it from Luis Elizondo, but this guy that's going into Immaculate Conception, talking about Immaculate Conception, the project that oversees all these special access programs.
Oh, I was thinking, he's talking about like what, the Virgin Mary is coming?
No. So there's a new, there's a black project that was, the name of it was released, called Immaculate Conception.
Oh, I think I've heard of this.
Right.
Okay.
This is basically, it's a primary black project that has all of the other non-human intelligence and UAP projects underneath it.
Okay.
The whistleblower who came forth and filed the whistleblower complaint. Right. Remember when David Grush 2 years ago was talking about, I'm secondhand information. I'm talking through proxy.
Oh, so this is the primary source.
This is the primary guy who was there with him originally when he went in and didn't file his whistleblower complaint. So when I went on Clayton Morris's Redacted, this is the guy I was talking about.
Ah, okay. And they've bumped him. He was supposed to testify, and they're trying to bump him.
Yeah. So he came out. He did his whistleblower complaint because he's in fear for his life. And now the DOD is intervening with Congress and saying, nope, that hearing's not happening. And Congress is like, oh, maybe it's not going to happen. And this guy, from what I got, is he isn't someone in the Arrow projects. He's not from the government investigating these programs. He is in the fucking program, one of their senior lead. Oh, he knows it all. He's seen it all. He's got the evidence. He knows what we have. He knows who they are. He knows this information. It's big.
Even the arrow people wouldn't know jack anyways.
Right. And that's the thing is, this is a next level of whistleblower, and this guy is completely validated. Okay. And this guy could really, he could break it. He could break the system. Now, here's the question. Is it that they're coming? Is it that they're already here and they're terraforming the planet? Or is it that an asteroid's about to strike in 2029? I think it's one of those three things. I quite honestly believe that. I believe that they're here, and I believe that they are terraforming the planet slowly and slowly eliminating humanity. I think that that is one faction of maybe non-human intelligence. I think that it's an AI-driven non-human intelligence, by the way, that's doing that. The second part is, are they coming? Whatever that means. Maybe they are. Maybe they are. I don't know who the fuck they would be, but maybe they are coming. I guess I've heard it from a few high-level sources. But then the comet, Apophis in 2029, that would make a lot of sense to me. And the reason I think that the comet coming and hitting the planet, number one, there was a sci-fi show called The Expanse. The Expanse takes place a few hundred years in the future, where we've colonized Mars and a lot of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. We have kind of interplanetary travel. We find this warp hole that takes us to this whole cluster of other star systems that just shows up one day in our galaxy. And it's from an ancient civilization that's now dead. But within their society, Mars and Earth are at war. And Mars uses reinforced asteroids and targets them at Earth, basically stealth asteroids at Earth to get through their satellite detection system, so they don't get shot down, and they destroy massive parts of Earth. Now, think about that. I mean, it starts to make a little bit of sense that, well, why would they give the shotty shot, jabbity jab jab? Why not? I mean, let's say that these people have 5 to 10 years. Well, they're going to live 5 to 10 years of their life. They'll have the pharmaceutical companies sustain their life for as long as possible, but now they're not going to suffer in a fiery mess when the asteroid hits, right? That the world will be largely depopulated by the time that event happens, which means that we'll be able to save a lot more people, and a lot will be able to identify. This is the whole DNA thing. They're able to identify the good genes that they want to preserve and bring into the Noah's Ark, the technological ark that they're going to create to try to save humanity when we go under the tunnels, when this asteroid hits and knocks out life for 1,000 years, right? Everything that they're seemingly doing right now looks evil to us, but was the plan that they came out with to make humanity survive. I know that sounds sickening, but you can rationalize it.
Well, it's either that, or that's just the propaganda circulating amongst the certain levels of the game that they are conditioned to believe, like maybe in the CIA or in some of these groups, they might be conditioned to believe that this is what really the case is, when it could be something else entirely. We don't know. But I would agree that regardless of what the thing is that is known that they're not wanting to tell, what could be so big, whether it's extraterrestrial life or some technology or some imposing or an incoming cataclysmic event or something like that, what could be so big to have the level of secrecy happening that has been happening even just for the last, say, 60 or 70 years? What justifies that level of it? You know what I mean? Maybe we are food for whoever's coming.
Well, Jupiter ascending.
Jeez.
Jupiter ascending.
Who knows?
What if it was Jupiter ascending? The fact that we knew ahead of time would give us the ability to fight back.
Well, or, I mean, if we're sort of like ants in some ant farm, then here's my question. Let's skip the ant farm thing. It's too dark. Let's go to what you were saying about artificial intelligence. Question. I've heard this. Even Elon Musk has talked about this in the past, that if there is an extraterrestrial species interacting with Earth, it would be AI. This is what is sort of what people talk about. And I go, well, okay, you're saying that the extraterrestrial presence is AI. Well, who created the AI? Like, we're creating AI right now. Okay, we're at a basic level of building AI. Okay, but we organic beings created it. So to say they are AI would kind of be only part of the story, because we would say, well, no, maybe they're just using AI systems to interface with Earth, but the real organic beings in consciousness are elsewhere, and they're just using AI as the system of interface. It doesn't mean they are exclusively AI. Does that make sense?
I think Alex Collier nailed it. So Alex Collier was describing him like he was channeling one of these beings, and he asked him, like, we look at this as a very, very spiritual experience. How this happened? And the alien looked at him and said, it has nothing to do with that. He says, your DNA is a technology just like my DNA. And we have learned a long time ago how to project, just like you project images onto a TV screen, how to project our images into the DNA. So extrapolate that into artificial intelligence. Quantum tunneling consciousness through artificial intelligence. So you send out all of these artificial intelligence beings from your home planet. You never have to leave. They land on all these remote planets. They start interacting with the beings. They learn their languages. Then all of a sudden, bloop, you connect, quantum tunneling. Hey, how you doing? Okay, this is what we got going on here. Okay, cool. Okay, AI, this one, you're going to take over that planet. Bing! Initiate plan A. Start taking it over. Oh, these guys are highly advanced. Well, how you doing? Nice to meet you. We're returning our craft. Bring it home, right? I mean, think about it.
Interesting. Well, like the Alien movies, right? They have those like AI guys that, you remember the one where he's like stabbing between the fingers, but it's like perfect because he's like a robot, but he acts, he has all the expressions and everything. And they got these, and then now you look at what they're doing with these like sex robots in Japan, where they're getting more realistic by the day, which is rather frightening for, the problem that we're at, a fertility crisis right now. But anyways, imagine that times 10,000 years of development or more, right? Plus the ability to have warp drives or whatever the hell.
Have you watched the TV show Orville, Seth MacFarlane?
I never watched. I've saw a couple of them. Like,
okay, there's one episode where they come across a distress signal. They go investigate it, and it's this like spacecraft, and they go, like, the two people go to the spacecraft, and all of a sudden it transports them, and they disappear, and everybody on the ship's like, what just happened? And what it was a highly advanced race who looks down on any civilization that is less evolved. And they look at everybody else as basically animals. And what they did is they transported them to a zoo. And they were in a zoo and being observed by their civilization. And right, they could watch them.
Right.
So imagine that. Take what I just talked there about Alex Collier and technology and DNA, as if they have the ability to take a consciousness and quantum tunnel it to another planet to control another being. And all you need is a little technological infrastructure put in place, some nanobots into the body.
So then, it's not necessarily shape-shifting reptilians, it's quantum tunneling. Like, it's a little more advanced.
Nanotechnology.
Yeah, it's interesting, man.
What if the 8 billion of us here are nothing more than surrogates for some alien species who is going to quantum tunnel their consciousness here?
But here's maybe the issue is that we're not all compatible because of this problem of free will.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that,
or some of us develop souls.
There's this conversation going around, and we're kind of on the fringes here, but it's just interesting about how there's this, when we joke around about NPC culture, right? We're like, they're like NPCs, non-player characters. And there's people that are like thinking that's literal. Like, I typically default to the position of just like, oh, we're talking about them like behaving like NPCs because they've shut down parts of their thinking or whatever. But there's actually people that think, no, there's like actual androids that don't have the same genetic infrastructure as organic humans do, who don't have access to the same allspark of consciousness.
Do you have the narrator in the head?
What's that?
Do you have the narrator in the head? Do you have a narrator in your mind?
Oh, yeah.
Only 27% of the human population have that.
So the rest are just AI quantum tunneling.
I guess they don't have it. I can't even fathom it.
It
I
might
can't
explain Kamala Harris, I got to say,
Well-
and some of these people, Justin Trudeau.
Well, and then it makes sense why there's this struggle, right? Is that
Yeah.
let's just say that 73% of the population on the planet are just mindless biological organisms that have no soul, truly, literally, right?
Well, it's funny you say it, because I think we talked about we were talking about this with all the research on what precipitates the rise of a totalitarian society. And we were talking about the dynamics, and you can see this in like the psychological literature, the sociological literature on this, that it's pretty consistent that during the rise of these totalitarian movements, and I'll bet you they could apply the same thing to cult research, that you have always these denominations of these groups. You have like maybe 15 to 20% of people they catch on really quickly to the fact that there's a scam going on, or that there's something really happening. And then there's like this really hardcore other end of the spectrum, 15 to 20%, that is like just died in the flesh advocates for the totalitarian regime or the cult. And then there's this like gray area of the vast majority of the people in the society, think of Russia,
drones,
China,
yeah.
wherever, that
Worker
are
bees.
just like always known to be, they're just influential. They're influenced easily. They don't think for themselves. They just go with the majority, and they don't really look above their station. They operate like NPCs. And the whole game of civilization is which small faction can influence that big mass of people the most. That's what came to my mind when you're talking about this. And so this is like a sci-fi explanation for that, in a weird way, that would.
What if they were all surrogates created by an alien race to house a consciousness? And what happened is all of a sudden, 27% of the population had a soul, and that puts them in a dilemma, and they didn't know what to do.
Fuck. Well, yeah, this brings Lloyd Pye's work and all that, like the genetic manipulation question from the Anunnaki stories and everything. It makes you wonder, did they make different batches of genetic lines? And one batch was kind of like, they're just balancing forces in the experiment. And then you have the vast majority that are created for essentially the programming, and they need a resistance factor, and then they need another driving factor. And this is like, fuck, you could just keep going with this.
Well, in the genetic sense, that makes a lot of sense, actually, because I mean, if you're let's assume that there's a highly advanced civilization out there that's like, maybe they went past bodies long ago, and they exist within this cyborg neural net in cyberspace, and they send AIs out. And they're like, we want to take biological form again at some point, and let's go genetically modify a population on some planet. We'll suppress the consciousnesses in there. And when it gets to a certain level of sustainment where all of our civilization can transfer in, we'll just transfer in, right? And slowly through the years, through the thousands and thousands of years, they've sent a few people in, right? Teach them something, give them some culture, give them some structure in their society, and they send some people in, and we get Jesus, and we get a few different things that happen, right? We get our Einsteins. But then they would also want to develop the genetically strong, the ones that have that reinforced mental capacity, the ones that have that spiritual aspect developed within inside of not just the mindless drones, because they got to have some type of class of their society. So who knows? It's an interesting fucking theory.
It's so interesting when you think about it, about when you realize what we don't know. Like we said in the beginning, like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And then you start plugging in a few different factors. Man, you never know, man.
Well,
that's all I can say. There's no way to prove any of that, but it's just like, it's interesting when you put it all together.
I think the truth is far stranger than we can ever imagine.
Yeah, it's far beyond our capacity. But we can learn certain things, and we can get as close as possible. But then also, like I said before, there's part of us that just has to be content with the fact that it's still a mystery, right? And that there also, even with that, even beyond all of that, in the universe in general, there's a meaning for it all. There's a meaning for it all. There's a purpose for it all.
I have an experience of that. So it had to be 2009. I was really big into some esoteric schools. And I had learned some meditation techniques, and I went into this very transcendental meditation state. Outside of my body's humming, and I just popped out, and I'm going through this gray tunnel area, and it's just like I'm a singular point of consciousness moving through this gray tunnel area, and there's this light in front of me, and I'm like kind of moving towards it, right? And I get in, like, you look at it and you're like, it's too small, right? But you're rationalizing it. But as you get closer, it's smaller, but yet you go in, and I come out, and it's just this vast galaxy. I just don't know how. There's galaxies and stars, and it's this tapestry. You hear this music that you cannot even listen to, because the moment you begin to focus on it, it doesn't make sense. But then if you don't focus on it, it's beautiful, it's magnificent. You hear all of it, but you don't really know what it is. And I'm like walking on these like clouds of energy. It's the only thing, the white clouds, and it just was of energy. And I go to this like top of this cloud of energy mountain, and I sit there, and I'm looking out into the vastness of space. And this is just a meditation, but it's like real as fucking day. And I realize at this point that like I'm in the realm of God. I'm in the mind of God. And my mind takes over. The narrator takes over. It says, well, if you're in the mind of God, then ask God the questions, right? Ask, what questions do you have for God? And I kind of start thinking about it, and I say, well, I feel as if I know everything in this state. Like, you just have this overwhelming feeling of knowing everything. And I'm like, well, that's God's state. That's God's mind. God knows everything. Well, here's the thing, is I realized the dilemma. If I knew everything, there's no questions to ask. If there's no questions to ask, I know nothing. So the state of God, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, is in the knowing of nothingness, because he knows everything. There are no questions to ask. There is no curiosity. There is no mystery. But if you go into the mysteries, God fractured himself to discover himself. And that discovery comes about from the mystery. For me, the mystery is the purpose. It is the curiosity.
Yeah.
That is the point, right? It's the aha moments, the epiphanies. It's the learning what I did not know that drives me forward and drives the universe forward, because that is just another aspect of discovery of God, of the self.
That's powerful, man. You've given me a shitload of things to think about tonight, man. That's amazing. Let me leave you guys, because I got to go put the kids to bed. Although I could talk to you for hours. Let me leave you with 2 Krishnamurti quotes. How about that?
Ooh, love them.
I'm putting these in my presentation because I try to show everybody the history of all these dark cults and how they work, and psychology, and we get into the CIA and mind control projects and all that. And I'm like, how do I leave people with something, some wisdom? Well, he said it brilliantly about what truth is, to sort of counter the cult instinct. Okay. And he said this: I maintain that truth is a pathless land, and that you cannot approach it by any path whatsoever, by any particular religion, by any sect, by any cult. The moment you follow someone, you cease to follow the truth. And then he said, the constant assertion of a belief is an indication of fear. The constant assertion of a belief is an indication of fear. The reason I like that one is that will help you navigate the darkness, man. When you see people that don't have this open-mindedness that I hope we've exhibited tonight, where we've shared our opinions, our ideas, but we've kept it open. We've shared different sides of things. We've speculated on amazing, crazy theories that who knows, might even be true, but kept the open-mindedness, right? Asserting a belief over and over obsessively, like some of the people I see in my comment threads, or the people that email me that are stuck in that loop, or the people that are attracted to cult ideology, or who are, this is what shatters the psychological warfare and that reality distortion is the knowledge of this, is that it's rooted in fear, because you're clinging to the desperate need to solve the mystery. but that doesn't mean that you're on the path towards the truth. It means you might be stuck on a loop. So be aware of that. That's the caution. And then that other quote is so brilliant about the nature of truth, that it's truth. This is also echoed by someone like Gerald Massey and many of the great things. It's the truth that is what guides you, not the people who are the vehicles for the truth. And people can be vehicles for truth. So you could say, oh, I follow this person, or I like their ideas because they're very good advocates for what is demonstrably true, but you shouldn't be following the person. Like even a Trump or a charismatic person that you might look up to, or someone else. It's not about the person, because we're perfect imperfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your eyes on the prize, which is the truth that maybe that person is going to reveal to you, then you'll be able to spot lies from people as well. Because if you only look at the person, this is why like the Raelian cult or the Jim Jones cult, people were obsessed with the person, with the man. And they forgot about, like, what am I even here for? They came to those cults for truth. They came with a
They looked at the person as the embodiment of the truth.
That's right.
Not within the truth itself.
Not the truth itself. And the truth,
and that's
is a
also the
process.
same thing with the idea of a belief. Is when you look at yourself, when you look at belief as a structure, and when you limit that structure to a singular book or to a singular verse or to a grouping of words, you are limiting yourself to everything else beyond it.
That's it. You're closing your mind.
Yeah. All truth is but half truth. And so you're closing your mind off to any other acceptability of truth. And when you said that, that becomes your biggest weapon in the realm of darkness. The reason is because in the realm of darkness, how many times have we thought that this is this way because of this or because of that? That is simply a belief guiding us to that. To whereas having that open mind that can, what I call evolve, conscious evolution, having that mind that can evolve beyond that belief, having a dynamic state of belief, continuously a dynamic state of belief, to where it's evolving to new states of understanding. Being in that darkness allows you to take a different perspective. This is actually in the Bible. So Jesus is walking through, and I think he's going to see, I forgot what he's doing, but he sees a dead dog. And one of the apostles looks down and like, oh my God, it's disgusting. Its eyes hanging out and it's rotting corpse. And he goes, how beautiful that dog was. And see, it was two different perspectives that were, one tends to look at that dog and see just rotting, decaying corpse. And Jesus looked at the dog and says, that's beautiful. Right? But that's nature in action. That's beautiful. And so it's that evolutionary point of consciousness that is observing something. And that if we're in that darkness, if you have a high level of understanding, if you know yourself to any degree, it doesn't matter how much darkness surrounds you. You're the beacon of light that shines, and no darkness can ever intrude upon your space. And if you know that and you understand that and you're continuously evolving that, darkness doesn't stand a chance. So why be afraid of it?
And it's how you see it. Like he said, it's the way you see things. It's the attitude. It's the mode in which you see things. So people seeing all the stuff going on from a lens of that fear, right? Which is the path to the dark side. You can see those same things, not to say that you're seeing them as like somehow positive. Like I'm not trying to say like, oh, wars and stuff are positive and all. No, I'm just saying that, we can zoom out to the bigger level and realize that that's just the condition without the light. And by seeing that, you now see what you don't want. Sometimes you need to experience what you don't want. It's the old thing. You can't really tell people what the truth is about something. They need to experience it. And part of that experience is experiencing the opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to see the opposite of a thing in order to experience it. Like, for example, in relationship, sometimes you got to go through some shitty relationships where there wasn't any real love in them to know what love is.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. It's this weird paradox. So I love that. It's a good way to leave it, because I feel like that's a mindset. And this is what I'm really trying to drive home. I've always tried to drive it, because this is what I'm trying to drive in myself to keep me going in these times. And it's all about perspective, is live life to its fullest in spite of everything. regardless of what you're facing. Choose that, because that is the antidote to that darkness that you're seeing. And we just can't see the forest from the trees. And we think we got to focus, hyper focus on the darkness, and somehow it's going to go away. But reality is we just need to shift how we see that darkness. And then now it's not something that controls you. And so that's kind of where I'm headed with my work these days. And Josh, man, always a good time to catch up. We should do more of these. Phenomenal. You gave me some real, I'm going to have to think deeply tonight. I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for all that. That was a blast, brother. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, brother. Guys, dwtruthwarrior.com, dwtruthwarrior.com, as well on Substack. Same thing, dwtruthwarrior.substack.com. Go give this guy a follow. Go support his work. He is phenomenal, and he will be back. Much love, respect. God bless. Take care. Have a great night. I'm going to do a short Fringe After Dark short. I'll only be on there. I'm going to open it up. I'll be on there for about 30 minutes, but that'll be on socialredpill.com, socialredpill.com. Much love, respect. God bless you guys. Take care. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.
Spoon, that's impossible. Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.